And you know what they say, sometimes you have to sacrifice to succeed. Nathaniel Riviera raised his champagne glass, his tailored tuxedo catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. My ex-wife never understood that. She wanted everything without the hard work. Polite laughter rippled through the circle of executives surrounding him. The RivTech 10th anniversary gala was in full swing, with hundreds of guests in designer attire mingling in the grand ballroom of the Westlake Regent Hotel. Is that what happened, Nate? I wanted everything without the hard work. The voice cut through the laughter like a blade. Nate's hand froze mid-gesture, champagne nearly spilling as he turned toward that voice, one he hadn't heard in 5 years but would recognize anywhere. Claire Winters stood at the edge of the circle, elegant in a simple blue dress that somehow outshone every designer gown in the room. But it wasn't Claire who made the blood drain from Nate's face. It was the two small children holding her hands, their striking blue eyes, his eyes, regarding him with innocent curiosity. "Claire," he managed, his voice barely audible over the orchestra. "I didn't expect—" "Clearly," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. The executives around Nate stepped back instinctively, creating a small clearing in the crowded ballroom. Whispers spread like wildfire through the gathering. Zara, Nate's executive assistant, hovered nearby, uncertain whether to intervene. "I thought perhaps you might want to meet some people," Claire continued, her voice calm despite the tremble in her hands. She gently guided the children forward. "This is Charlotte," she said, placing her hand on her daughter's shoulder. The little girl stood tall in her navy blue dress, her chin raised with unmistakable confidence. "And this is Oliver," the boy, in a matching suit, partially hid behind his mother's skirt, though his curious eyes never left Nate's face. "My children?" Nate's voice cracked on the word, his usual commanding presence crumbling. The champagne glass now dangled forgotten from his fingers. Charlotte, bold as ever, stepped forward. "Are you our father? Mom said we were meeting someone important today." The simple question seemed to physically impact Nate. He staggered back slightly, steadying himself against a nearby table. The murmurs around them grew louder as the gathered business elite realized what was unfolding before them. "Everyone's staring," Oliver whispered, tugging at his mother's dress. Claire's composure never wavered as she faced the man who had once been her everything, the man who had chosen an empire over their family. Welcome back to the Mr. Ross Story Trail, where we explore the unexpected turns life takes and the powerful lessons hidden in human experiences. For our new viewers joining us today, this is where compelling stories meet valuable insights about life's complex journeys. Today's story strikes at the heart of what matters most, the choices we make between success and family, between ambition and connection. As you've just witnessed, Nathaniel Riviera, billionaire CEO of RivTech, is facing the consequences of choices made years ago, confronted by the wife he left behind and the children he never knew existed. For our loyal subscribers, thank you for returning to another journey down the story trail. For those experiencing our channel for the first time, prepare for a narrative that will challenge your perspectives on success and fulfillment. The ballroom had fallen into an uncomfortable hush, the orchestra's notes fading as all eyes turned toward the unfolding drama. Zara finally stepped forward, quietly directing the nearby staff to usher guests to the adjoining reception area. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," she suggested, her professional demeanor masking her shock at the situation. Nate nodded mutely, still staring at the children, his children, as though they might disappear if he looked away. One moment can change everything. Imagine building an empire worth billions, only to discover you've lost what truly matters, your family. That's the reality Nathaniel Riviera faced as his ex-wife Claire revealed the existence of children he never knew he had. Have you ever sacrificed something precious for success, only to wonder later if it was worth the cost? Or perhaps you've been on Claire's side, watching someone you love choose ambition over connection, forced to make difficult decisions to protect your heart and those who depend on you. This is the core dilemma we face in today's world. The relentless pursuit of professional success often comes at a personal price. We're told we can have it all, but can we really? Nathaniel built a tech empire worth billions while remaining emotionally bankrupt. Claire created a loving home for their children, but at the cost of their knowing their father. What happens when these worlds collide? Can a man who chose wealth over family find redemption? Is forgiveness possible after 5 years of absence? And what about these innocent children caught in the middle of adult choices? Stay with me as we journey through this remarkable story of pride, consequences, and the possibility of second chances. The answers might challenge everything you thought you knew about success and family. Before we continue with Nathaniel and Claire's confrontation, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Our channel thrives on sharing these powerful human stories that reflect life's most meaningful lessons. If you're connecting with this story already, Drop a comment about whether you think Nate deserves forgiveness or if Claire was right to keep the children from him all these years. Your engagement helps us reach more viewers with these important narratives. If you know someone who might benefit from this story, perhaps a friend who's struggling with work-life balance or facing difficult family decisions, share this video with them. Sometimes the stories we hear help us navigate our own challenges. Now, let's return to that pivotal moment at the RivTech Gala, where a family torn apart by ambition stands at a crossroads. Zara guided them to a private conference room adjacent to the ballroom, away from the curious stares of the gala attendees. The twins, sensing the tension but not understanding its source, stayed close to Claire as they entered the room. "Should I stay?" Zara asked Nate, her hand still on the door. "No," he answered, his voice hoarse, "but ensure we're not disturbed." As the door closed behind her, the four of them stood in silence. The muffled sounds of the gala continued outside. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, a stark contrast to the heavy silence within. Nathaniel Rivera grew up on the south side of Westlake, where apartment buildings stood shoulder to shoulder and opportunity seemed as scarce as parking spaces. His father worked double shifts at the city's manufacturing plant, while his mother cleaned offices downtown. They taught him that nothing in life came easy, a lesson he carried like armor. By the time Nate entered Westlake University on a partial scholarship, he had already developed the ruthless focus that would later define him. He wore second-hand blazers but carried himself with the confidence of old money. His classmates in business economics quickly learned that Nate's hand would always be the first to rise, his arguments the most thoroughly researched, his networking the most strategic. "Rivera's going places," professors would murmur. "Just hope he remembers us when he gets there." Claire Winters arrived at the same university from the quiet suburb of Meadowbrook, where her father taught high school physics and her mother ran the local library. Her childhood had been filled with books, ideas, and dinner table debates about philosophy and ethics. While Nate calculated profit margins, Claire explored human motives in her literature major. She wore colorful scarves regardless of season, carried tea in a thermos everywhere she went, and could often be found reading under the massive oak tree in the campus quad, completely oblivious to the social hierarchies forming around her. They inhabited different worlds within the same campus. Nate in the gleaming business school building with its stock ticker displays, Claire in the ivy-covered liberal arts hall with its worn wooden benches and chalkboards. Their paths crossed in their senior year during a mandatory ethics and professional practice course. Professor Adelman had paired students across disciplines, business majors with humanities students, for the semester-long project. "Winters and Rivera," he called out, not knowing he was creating a collision course for two opposing forces. Claire approached Nate after class, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Claire. Looks like we're partners." Nate glanced up from his planner, momentarily startled by her direct approach. "Nathaniel Rivera. I prefer Nate." His handshake was firm, professional, the kind he'd practiced for future boardrooms. "Nice to meet you, Nate. Fair warning, I know nothing about business economics, but I'm excellent at asking annoying questions about why things matter." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "And I know nothing about literature, but I'm excellent at explaining why things need to be profitable." Claire laughed, a genuine sound that drew glances from across the room. "I think this might be an interesting partnership." Neither could have possibly known just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Their first meeting for the ethics project took place at the campus coffee shop. Claire arrived with books spilling from her bag, while Nate came armed with his leather portfolio and laptop. "So," Claire began, stirring honey into her tea, "our assignment is to analyze ethical dilemmas in the corporate world. Any thoughts on where to start?" Nate opened his laptop. "I've prepared a list of case studies, companies that sacrificed ethics for profit, and the consequences they faced. We could analyze the cost-benefit." "Wait," Claire interrupted, her head tilting slightly. "What about starting with why ethics matter in the first place, before jumping to consequences?" Nate paused, thrown off rhythm. "That's philosophical. That's the point of ethics, isn't it?" Their first session ran 3 hours longer than planned. What began as an academic discussion evolved into a passionate debate about values, purpose, and the meaning of success. Nate argued for practical applications, Claire pushed for deeper understanding. Neither fully conceded, but both left with expanded perspectives. Their differences should have created friction. Instead, they generated curiosity. Nate found himself asking questions he'd never considered important. Claire discovered practical applications for ideas she'd only explored theoretically. "You know," Claire told him during their third meeting, "most business majors I've met just want to know how to make money. You actually care about the impact." Nate looked up, surprised. "Most literature students I know think business is soulless. You actually see the potential for change."
Their study sessions extended beyond the project requirements.
They discussed books Claire recommended and business innovations Nate admired. They debated late into the night at the 24-hour diner near campus, sometimes forgetting their project entirely as conversation flowed from childhood memories to future aspirations. When Professor Adelman awarded them the highest grade in the class, neither was surprised. Their presentation had blended ethical theory with practical business applications so seamlessly that it was being shared with other departments as an exemplar. "A good team," Nate said as they celebrated over coffee. Claire smiled. "Complementary perspectives. Is that literary analysis for 'you were right'?" He teased. "It's literary analysis for 'we're both right in different ways.'" It wasn't until the project ended that Nate realized how much he'd come to look forward to their meetings. He found himself creating excuses to contact her questions about a book she'd mentioned, invitations to lectures he thought might interest her. Claire noticed the pattern but waited, allowing him to navigate his way to what seemed increasingly inevitable. When he finally asked her to dinner, not to study, just to talk, she accepted with a smile that suggested she'd been expecting the invitation all along. Their relationship deepened during that final semester of college. Between classes and job interviews, they carved out time for each other. Claire introduced Nate to poetry readings and art exhibits. He took her to business networking events and startup pitches. One evening, as they walked through campus after a lecture, Nate stopped abruptly before the business school building. "One day," he said, pointing to the donor wall where alumni names were engraved in granite, "my name will be right there, not just as a graduate but as someone who changed things." Claire observed the intensity in his eyes. "What drives you so hard, Nate?" He was quiet for a moment. "My father worked himself to exhaustion for 40 years and has nothing to show for it. I watched my parents struggle for everything. I won't live that way." Claire took his hand. "There's nothing wrong with wanting success. It's more than wanting it," he replied. "I need to create something lasting, something that matters." Claire's nurturing nature complemented Nate's ambition. While he strategized career moves, she reminded him to eat. When he stayed up all night working on business plans, she brought him coffee and listened patiently to his ideas. She didn't try to temper his ambition. She gave it room to breathe while ensuring he didn't lose himself entirely. Nate found in Claire something he hadn't realized he needed, someone who saw him completely and valued him anyway. She didn't need his potential success or status. She appreciated his mind, his determination, even his flaws. During midterm week, Claire found Nate sick with fever, still attempting to complete a financial analysis project. Instead of simply taking him soup, she sat beside him, took notes as he dictated through coughs, and organized his scattered research papers. "You don't have to do this," he protested weakly. "I know," she replied simply, continuing to type. "I want to—" Later, when she received a particularly harsh critique on her thesis draft, Nate spent an entire weekend helping her reorganize her argument, making countless coffee runs and creating a schedule to ensure she'd meet her deadline. "You don't have to do this," she echoed his earlier words. "I know," he answered with a smile. "I want to—" As graduation approached, reality loomed. Claire had been offered a teaching position at Westlake High School. Nate had several corporate offers but turned them all down, determined to start his own company. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," he admitted one night as they sat on the hood of his car, watching the city lights below campus. Turning down Mercer Consulting to start from nothing, Claire leaned against his shoulder. "I don't think you're crazy. I think you know exactly what you want." "What I want is to build something meaningful," he said, then turned to face her. "With you beside me." The proposal wasn't planned or polished. There was no ring, no bended knee. Just Nate's hand finding Claire's under the starlight. "I don't have much to offer right now," he continued. "The apartment I can afford is tiny. The hours I'll need to work will be insane. But I promise you, Claire, everything I build will be for us. Our future." Claire smiled. "I never cared about what you could give me, Nate. I care about who we become together." They married 2 weeks after graduation in a small ceremony at the university chapel. Claire wore a simple white dress she found at a vintage shop. Nate wore the new suit he'd bought for job interviews. Their reception was held in the garden of Claire's parents' home, with fairy lights strung through the trees and homemade food prepared by friends. When they danced under those lights, Nate whispered promises in Claire's ear, of the home they would have, the family they would build, the life they would create together. Claire whispered back her own promises, of patience, support, and unwavering belief in his vision. That night, in the small hotel room they could barely afford, they mapped out their future on the hotel stationery. "5-year plan," Nate announced, writing the heading in his precise handwriting. "Very romantic," Claire teased. "Wait and see," he replied with a grin. Together they outlined their shared vision. Nate would build his company, Rivtech. Claire would teach and eventually pursue her master's degree. They would save for a house in a neighborhood with good schools, and when the time was right, they would start a family. 2 children, Claire suggested. At least, Nate agreed, adding it to their plan. As they fell asleep in each other's arms, their future seemed perfectly aligned, a partnership of complementary strengths and shared dreams. Neither could have foreseen how success would test the very foundation of those promises, or how the business that was meant to build their future would ultimately come between them. For that night, at least, all that existed was possibility, and the certainty that together they could overcome any obstacle life placed in their path. The 1-bedroom apartment Nate and Claire rented was on the 5th floor of a building with an unreliable elevator. Their wedding gifts, a mismatched collection of kitchen items, linens, and picture frames, barely filled the compact space. The living room doubled as Nate's office, with a folding table against the wall serving as his desk. "Home sweet home," Claire announced cheerfully on move-in day, hanging a string of colorful paper lanterns across the living room ceiling, while Nate assembled their second-hand furniture. "It's temporary," Nate promised, tightening the last screw on their coffee table. 2 years at most, then we'll upgrade." Claire placed a potted plant on the windowsill, adding a touch of life to the plain white walls. "I don't mind. It's cozy." Their first year of marriage was defined by careful budgeting and creative solutions. Claire stretched her teaching salary to cover their basic expenses while Nate poured every penny into building Rivtech. Their date nights consisted of home-cooked meals and walks around the neighborhood park. They learned to shop at discount grocery stores, cut each other's hair, and find free entertainment in community events. On weekends, they hunted for furniture at estate sales, slowly furnishing their apartment with character pieces they restored together. Claire became adept at repainting old chairs, while Nate discovered a talent for refinishing wooden tables. "Look what I found," Claire exclaimed one Saturday, returning from a neighborhood yard sale with a vintage desk lamp. $10, and it works perfectly." Nate looked up from his business plan drafts. "That's great. Did you get the groceries too?" Claire's smile faltered. "I spent our grocery money on the lamp. I thought your workspace needed better lighting." Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We had it all budgeted out, Claire. How am I supposed to work without eating?" "I'll make it work," she promised, already calculating which of her lunch meals she could skip that week to make up for the shortfall. "Your eyes were getting strained. It's an investment." That night, Nate surprised her with takeout from their favorite Chinese restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in. "I thought we couldn't afford it," Claire said, eyeing the paper containers. "We can't," he admitted. "But sometimes you need to spend money to keep your sanity." He placed the lamp on his desk, adjusting its angle. "You were right. This helps." These small compromises became the rhythm of their early marriage, Nate's practical focus occasionally clashing with Claire's intuitive care, followed by mutual adaptation and renewed appreciation. Rivtech began as nothing more than an idea scribbled in Nate's notebook, integrated data solutions for mid-sized businesses. No fancy office, no startup capital, no team, just Nate working from their apartment, developing software in the hours between midnight and dawn. His first 3 business loan applications were rejected. The 4th earned him a meeting with a loan officer who listened patiently before delivering the verdict. "Your concept has potential, Mr. Rivera, but you lack experience in collateral." Nate returned home dejected. "Maybe I should take the job at Mercer after all. They're still interested." Claire sat beside him on their worn couch. "Is that what you want?" "Of course not. I want Rivtech to succeed." "Then we keep going," she said simply. "Find another way." The other way emerged when Claire suggested Nate develop a prototype to demonstrate his concept. For 6 weeks he barely slept, coding a basic version of his data integration platform, while Claire managed everything else: bills, meals, cleaning, even drafting responses to his emails. When the prototype was ready, Nate presented it to 3 small local businesses, offering free implementation in exchange for testimonials. One agreed, a family-owned manufacturing company struggling with outdated systems. "They can't pay," Nate explained to Claire. "But if it works, they'll become our case study." "So we're still not making money," Claire noted, reviewing their dwindling savings. "Not yet, but we're building credibility." The implementation took twice as long as expected. Bugs emerged, systems crashed, and the client nearly pulled out twice. Nate spent 18-hour days at their facility, coming home only to shower and change clothes. Claire left encouraging notes in his laptop bag and prepared meals he could eat quickly between troubleshooting sessions. Finally, after 3 grueling months, the system functioned. The client's efficiency improved by 22%, a statistic Nate featured prominently in the case study he created. Armed with concrete results, Nate approached a small business incubator program. This time, he was accepted. Rivtech received its first modest funding, along with mentorship in a shared office space downtown. "We did it," he told Claire, bringing home a bottle of champagne they couldn't afford. This is just the beginning. While Nate built Rivtech, Claire built their home life around the constraints of entrepreneurship. She took on additional tutoring sessions after school to supplement their income. She maintained their apartment, managed their finances, and created a support system for Nate that allowed him to focus entirely on his company. When Nate mentioned an upcoming meeting with potential investors, Claire spent hours at the thrift store finding him a suitable blazer and tie. When he needed to practice his pitch, she gathered her fellow teachers to serve as an audience, providing feedback from non-technical perspectives. "You're explaining it wrong," she told him after one practice session. "Nobody understands what leveraging cross-platform data integration protocols means. Tell them how it helps real people." Nate rewrote his pitch that night. The next day, he secured his first significant investment. The lean times tested them in unexpected ways. The refrigerator broke during a heat wave, spoiling what little food they had. Their car needed repairs they couldn't afford. Claire's parents offered financial help, which Nate refused out of pride. "We don't need handouts," he insisted. "It's not a handout. It's family helping family," Claire countered, but respected his decision. Instead, Claire sold her grandmother's antique bracelet, a graduation gift she treasured, to pay for the car repair. She never told Nate where the money came from, and he was too absorbed in a coding problem to ask. These sacrifices became routine for Claire. She postponed her plans for graduate school. She wore the same clothes season after season. She collected leftover sandwiches from school events to bring home for dinner. "You shouldn't have to live like this," Nate said one night, watching her mend a tear in her only professional blazer. Claire looked up from her stitching. "Like what?" "Struggling, sacrificing everything." She set down her needle. "I'm not sacrificing everything, Nate. I'm investing in us. There's a difference." As Rivtech gained traction, their time together diminished. Nate worked 16-hour days at the incubator office, often sleeping on the couch there. Claire's schedule filled with teaching and tutoring commitments. They communicated through hastily written notes and brief phone calls. 3 days before their first anniversary, Nate called Claire with excitement in his voice. "We've been selected for the Westlake Tech Showcase. This could change everything." "That's wonderful," Claire replied. "When is it?" "This weekend. I'll need to prepare all night for the next few days." Claire was silent for a moment. "This weekend is our anniversary." "Is that this weekend?" "I'm sorry, I completely—" He paused. "Claire, this opportunity—" "I understand," she said quietly. "The showcase is important. I'll make it up to you. I promise." Claire spent their anniversary alone, grading papers at their kitchen table. Nate called at midnight, exhausted but elated. His presentation had impressed several potential investors who requested meetings. "I wish you could have been there," he told her. "Me too," she replied, not mentioning the dinner reservation she'd canceled or the card still sitting unopened on his pillow. The pattern continued as Rivtech grew. Important moments were postponed, then forgotten. Conversations became briefings about schedules and bills rather than exchanges of ideas and dreams. The intellectual connection that had drawn them together faded beneath the practical demands of building a business. One night, as Claire waited for Nate to return from another late meeting, she found his old notebook, the one where they'd written their 5-year plan. Many of the business goals were checked off or revised upward. The personal goals, home, family, travel, remained untouched. When Nate finally came home, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, the notebook open before her. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Nate glanced at it. "Our old plan. We're ahead of schedule on the company projections, and behind on everything else." He sat across from her, fatigue etched on his face. "The business has to come first right now. That's how we'll achieve those other goals later." "Later," Claire repeated. "How much later, Nate? When does our life together get to be a priority?" "It is a priority," he insisted. "Everything I'm doing is for us, but there is no us anymore. There's Rivtech, and then there's me, waiting at home." Nate reached for her hand across the table. "This phase won't last forever. Once we secure the Miller contract, things will stabilize. I promise." Claire wanted to believe him. She remembered the passionate, thoughtful man she'd fallen in love with. The man who talked about building something meaningful, a legacy they would share. "One more big push," he pleaded. "Then we'll get back on track with our plans, all of them." Claire nodded, choosing to trust him once more. Neither mentioned that they'd had variations of this conversation before, or that Nate's promises of one more push had become a recurring refrain in their marriage. As she watched him fall asleep within minutes of lying down, Claire wondered how long their foundation could hold under the weight of his ambitions. She still believed in Nate and his vision, but a quiet doubt had taken root. When success finally came, would there be anything left of them to celebrate it? The Miller contract changed everything. After 18 months of struggle, countless pitch meetings and near bankruptcy, Rivtech finally landed a deal worth celebrating. A $1.2 million contract to overhaul the data systems for Miller Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing conglomerate with 30 locations nationwide. The morning Nate received the confirmation email, he burst into their bedroom where Claire was still sleeping, having returned late from grading final exams. "Claire, wake up." He bounced onto the bed, tablet in hand. "They said yes." Claire blinked awake, disoriented. "Who said yes?" "Miller. They accepted our proposal." He thrust the tablet toward her, the email displayed on screen. 1.2 million, Claire. We did it. She sat up, sleep forgotten as she read the email. "Oh my God, Nate, this is incredible." He pulled her into a tight embrace. "This changes everything. No more scraping by, no more wondering if we can pay rent. Rivtech is officially legitimate." That evening, they celebrated at an upscale restaurant downtown, their first fancy meal since their wedding. Nate ordered champagne, toasting to Claire across the table. "To the woman who believed in me when nobody else did," he said, his eyes shining. "I couldn't have done this without you." Claire raised her glass. "To Rivtech's success, and to the beginning of our next chapter." "I'm hiring a team," Nate announced after their entrees arrived. 3 developers, a project manager, and a sales representative. "We're moving to a real office, no more incubator space." Claire listened as Nate outlined his expansion plans, his words tumbling out faster than she could process them. His excitement was contagious. Yet something in his phrasing gave her pause. "I'm doing this, I'm hiring that," she noted quietly. "When did Rivtech become just you instead of us?" Nate reached for her hand. "Figure of speech. This is absolutely our success. You've been there every step of the way." Claire smiled, pushing away the fleeting concern. This was their moment of triumph after so much struggle. Everything they'd sacrificed had led to this breakthrough. Surely now, life would become easier. Neither could have predicted how profoundly the success would reshape their relationship, or how the company meant to secure their future would begin to consume their present. Within months, Rivtech grew from a 2-person operation to a team of 12. Nate leased sleek office space in the Westlake Tech Corridor, complete with glass walls and ergonomic furniture. For the first time in their marriage, money wasn't a constant worry. They moved from their tiny apartment to a downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Their second-hand furniture was replaced with designer pieces chosen by the interior decorator Nate hired as a surprise for Claire. "What do you think?" he asked, leading her through the newly furnished space. Claire ran her hand along the pristine white couch that had replaced their worn but comfortable one. "It's beautiful," she said, though something about the minimalist design felt cold, impersonal, nothing like the warm, eclectic home they'd created together. "The decorator said this style project's success," Nate explained, mistaking her hesitation for awe. "Important for entertaining clients and investors." "We'll be entertaining here?" Claire asked. "Of course, it's part of building the business. Speaking of which," he checked his watch, "we have dinner with the Prestons tonight. Walter's considering investing in our next development phase." The Prestons were the first of many new acquaintances who entered their lives, wealthy entrepreneurs, investors, and tech executives who formed Nate's expanding professional network. Dinner parties, charity galas, and networking events filled their calendar. Claire found herself in conversations about stock portfolios and property investments, a world away from the literary discussion she enjoyed with her teaching colleagues. "Try to mention my data security approach to Jonathan," Nate whispered to her at one function. "His company could be our next major client." "I'm not sure I understand it well enough to explain," Claire admitted. "Just drop it into conversation. I'll take it from there." Claire dutifully played her part, learning to navigate this new social landscape. She updated her wardrobe, practiced small talk about business topics, and became skilled at connecting Nate with potential clients. Yet with each event, she felt increasingly like an accessory to his success rather than a partner in it. One night, after a particularly exhausting dinner with investors, Claire kicked off her heels and collapsed onto their bed. "Those people have no idea who we really are," she murmured. Nate loosened his tie. "What do you mean? They know CEO Nate and his wife. They don't know us. The couple who assembled furniture together and celebrated finding quarters in the couch." Nate sat beside her. "This is still us, Claire, just upgraded." "Upgraded," she repeated softly. "I'm not sure I wanted an upgrade. I liked who we were." "You prefer struggling to pay bills?" "Of course not. I just miss feeling like we're in this together, rather than me watching from the sidelines." Nate kissed her forehead. "You're not on the sidelines. You're essential to all of this." He gestured around them. "And this is just the beginning." As Rivtech expanded, so did the demands on Nate's time. He was first to arrive at the office and last to leave. Dinners at home became rare, replaced by working meals with his team or clients. When he was home, his laptop was ever present, emails demanding immediate attention regardless of the hour. Claire would wake at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty, the glow of his computer screen visible from the home office down the hall. Weekends dissolved into extended workdays. Vacation plans were made, then postponed, then forgotten entirely. The Hamilton deal needs attention, he would explain. Or, the development team hit a roadblock. Always a crisis. Always a reason why this particular moment was critical to Rivtech's future. His phone became an extension of his hand, constantly buzzing with notifications. During the rare occasions they shared a meal, his attention remained divided between Claire and the stream of emails. "Can we have one conversation without your phone?" Claire asked over dinner one night, after watching him respond to messages between bites. Nate looked up, genuinely surprised. "Sorry, the Beijing office is dealing with a server issue. You have a team for that, don't you? Isn't that why you hired people?" "Yes, but ultimately it's my responsibility. The team is still learning." Claire set down her fork. "Everything seems to be your responsibility lately. That's what building a company means, Claire. I can't just clock out at 5 like..." He stopped himself. "Like I do?" she finished. "Is that what you were going to say?" "I didn't mean it like that. Your work is important too, but different," she noted. "Structured, predictable." "I was going to say stable," he countered. "You know what you're facing each day. Rivtech is constantly changing, constantly facing new challenges." Claire didn't argue further, but the implication lingered between them, that her career as an educator was somehow less demanding, less important than his role as CEO. The conversation ended there, but the distance it created extended long after the dishes were cleared. The cracks in their marriage appeared gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Date nights, once sacred, were rescheduled, then eventually dropped from their calendar entirely. Conversations became transactions, quick exchanges about household logistics rather than the deep discussions that had once drawn them together. Claire tried various approaches to bridge the growing gap. She surprised Nate at his office with lunch, only to wait 40 minutes while he finished a call. She planned weekend getaways, which were inevitably cut short by work emergencies. She attempted to learn more about his business, asking questions about current projects, but found his explanations increasingly technical and devoid of the passion that had once animated them. Determined to save their connection, Claire adapted. She adjusted her expectations about their time together. She developed independent interests and friendships to fill the hours Nate spent working. She found ways to participate in Rivtech's growth, hosting dinner parties for potential clients and editing Nate's presentations. When her school offered her the department chair position, Claire hesitated before accepting. The role would require additional hours she had been keeping free in case Nate became available. After a week of deliberation, she took the job. "That's wonderful," Nate said when she told him, though his eyes remained on his laptop screen. "You deserve it. It means I'll have evening commitments twice a week. Department meetings. That's fine. I'm usually at the office anyway." The response stung, though Claire couldn't decide whether it was because he didn't mind her absence or because he so readily acknowledged his own. She threw herself into her new position, finding satisfaction in mentoring younger teachers and developing curriculum. Her colleagues became her primary social circle, people who valued her insights and presence. In the classroom and faculty meetings, she felt heard in ways she no longer did at home. Their marriage settled into a new normal, two successful people leading increasingly separate lives who occasionally intersected in their beautiful condo for brief moments of connection. They still loved each other, still believed in the partnership they'd created, but the daily practice of being a couple had slipped away amidst their professional pursuits. As Nate and Claire drift further apart, their story raises questions we all face in our own relationships. Career ambitions, financial security, personal fulfillment. How do we balance these competing priorities? I want to ask you, if you were in their position, what would you prioritize? Would you choose Nate's path of relentless professional growth, or Claire's attempt to balance career with relationship? Perhaps you see another approach altogether? Take a moment to hit pause and reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone facing similar challenges in their own life. If you're finding value in this story, please support our channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. These real-life lessons are what the Mr. Ross Story Trail is all about, learning from others' experiences so we can make better choices in our own lives. Now, let's continue with Nate and Claire's journey, as the distance between them grows from a gap into a chasm. 3 years into their marriage, Rivtech secured a series of contracts with international clients. Nate's calendar filled with business trips, Tokyo, London, Singapore, Berlin, each lasting longer than the last. The dining table in their condo became a way station for his passport, travel adapters, and foreign currency. 2 weeks in Hong Kong, Nate announced one evening, packing his carry-on with practiced efficiency. "The Zhang Group is considering implementing our system across all their subsidiaries. This could triple our annual revenue." Claire leaned against the doorframe, watching him sort through travel documents. 2 weeks? You just got back from London 3 days ago." "I know the timing isn't ideal," he acknowledged without looking up. "But Zhang won't wait. If we don't move now, our competitors will." There's always another competitor, another contract that can't wait, Claire observed quietly. Nate finally paused, meeting her gaze. That's business, Claire. Opportunities have expiration dates, so do relationships, she replied, but the comment slid past him as his phone chimed with another message requiring immediate attention. The pattern solidified month by month. When physically present, Nate existed in a different mental space, consumed by quarterly projections, market expansion strategies, and personnel challenges. His vocabulary evolved to include corporate jargon that created yet another barrier between them. Conversations that once flowed naturally now required translation. Rivtech's success exceeded even Nate's ambitious projections. The company expanded from 12 employees to 50, then 100. They moved to larger offices, added departments, acquired smaller competitors. Each growth milestone reset Nate's priorities, pushing personal considerations further down his list. His dreams expanded proportionally with his success. The goalpost kept moving, from stability to growth to market domination. The hungry ambition Claire had once admired became an insatiable force that consumed everything in its path, including their marriage. I need to be in Seattle tomorrow, Nate informed Claire over a rare dinner at home. Potential acquisition target. Claire set down her fork. Tomorrow is the faculty awards dinner. I'm receiving the Excellence in Teaching Award. I reminded you last week. Recognition flashed briefly across Nate's face, quickly replaced by calculation. I'll try to reschedule the Seattle meeting. But you won't, Claire stated, not a question but an acknowledgement of reality. Nate sighed. This acquisition is crucial, Claire. It completes our service offering in ways that... I understand, she interrupted, her voice flat. The company needs you more than I do. That's not fair, he protested, though his hand still reached for his phone to email his travel coordinator about flight options. In that moment, they both recognized the truth neither wanted to admit. Rivtech had become not just Nate's priority, but his identity. The company was no longer a means to build their future together. It had become his future, with Claire repositioned as a supporting character rather than a co-lead in the story of his life. Claire's department chair position brought professional fulfillment, but highlighted the emptiness of her personal life. She returned each evening to the pristine condo that never quite felt like home, too perfect, too untouched, like a model unit waiting for real inhabitants to create memories within its walls. During Nate's frequent absences, silence became her constant companion. She developed rituals to combat the loneliness, reading in different rooms to make the space feel occupied, playing music to fill the quiet, calling her parents more frequently. Her colleagues noticed the change in her. "Everything okay at home?" asked Monica, a fellow English teacher, after Claire volunteered for weekend administrative work for the third month in a row. "Just keeping busy," Claire responded with a practiced smile. "Nate's traveling again. He's always traveling," Monica observed. "When was the last time you two took a vacation together?" Claire couldn't remember. Every planned getaway had been postponed due to Rivtech emergencies. Their last anniversary had passed with only a flower delivery and a brief video call from different time zones. Determined to reconnect, Claire initiated a series of gestures. She surprised Nate at his office with lunch, only to discover he was in a closed-door meeting that would last hours. She booked a weekend at the coastal bed and breakfast where they'd spent their mini-honeymoon, carefully coordinating with his assistant to ensure his calendar was clear, only to have Nate cancel when a server crash required his attention. She left notes in his briefcase, sent meaningful texts, and tried to engage him in conversations about anything besides work. Most attempts were met with distracted appreciation at best, outright postponement at worst. "I thought we could try that new restaurant tonight," she suggested one evening as Nate arrived home. He dropped his keys on the counter, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "Can't tonight. The development team is having issues with the Knox implementation. I need to review their code." "You need to eat," Claire pointed out. "I'll order something to the office. We haven't had dinner together in 2 weeks." Nate finally looked up, noticing her dress and the careful styling of her hair. His expression softened momentarily. "You look nice. I made reservations." He hesitated, visibly torn. "Give me 2 hours. I'll meet you there at 8. Claire agreed, knowing the pattern all too well. At 7:45, his text arrived, emergency board call. "Don't wait up." She ate alone at the restaurant, the empty chair across from her a fitting metaphor for her marriage. The waiter offered sympathetic smiles as he removed Nate's unused place setting. Claire left a generous tip, compensation for occupying a table for 2 while dining solo. That night, she stood on their balcony, looking out at the city lights. Far below, the streets teemed with people connecting, laughing, sharing moments. Claire felt suspended above it all, isolated in their perfect high-rise lifestyle. When Nate finally returned after midnight, he found her asleep on the couch, still in her dress, an open book on her chest. He carried her to bed without waking her, a tender gesture from the man she'd married, briefly visible beneath the CEO he'd become. To the outside world, Nate and Claire Rivera personified success. His business achievements garnered press coverage and industry awards. Her innovative teaching methods earned recognition from the school board. They attended functions in designer clothes, donated to prestigious charities, and maintained the polished image of a power couple. Few people glimpsed the reality behind the facade. Two individuals leading increasingly separate lives, connected more by shared history than present experience. Their conversations, once flowing and meaningful, became transactional exchanges of information. The cleaning service is coming Thursday. I'll be in Chicago until Tuesday. We need to please reply to the Hansons' charity gala. Their differences, once complementary, became points of contention. Claire's focus on people and relationships contrasted sharply with Nate's emphasis on metrics and outcomes. Her desire for depth clashed with his need for efficiency. "How was your day?" Claire would ask when they managed to share an evening at home. "Productive," Nate would reply, then launch into a detailed account of Rivtech's latest developments, rarely pausing to pose the same question to her. When he finally did, his attention often wandered before she finished answering. More than once, Claire stopped mid-sentence, testing whether he'd notice. He rarely did, nodding absently while his mind clearly processed other matters. Even their values began to diverge. Claire watched with concern as Nate's business decisions became increasingly cutthroat. The idealistic student who had debated ethics with passion now spoke of necessary competitive strategies and market dominance with cold calculation. "What happened to building something meaningful?" she asked after he described how Rivtech had undercut a smaller competitor to secure a contract. "This is meaningful," he countered. "Creating jobs, building wealth, establishing market position, that's real impact." "At any cost?" "In business, hesitation equals failure," he replied, the statement sounding rehearsed, as though he'd said it many times in boardrooms and strategy sessions. Claire wondered when principles had become liabilities in his worldview, and whether he recognized how profoundly he had changed, or if the change had been so gradual that it remained invisible to him. Their social circles rarely overlapped anymore. Nate surrounded himself with executives, investors, and industry peers who reinforced his priorities and perspective. Claire found connection with fellow educators and a book club she joined seeking intellectual stimulation. When they did socialize together, they performed the roles of devoted couple without the genuine emotion that had once made such pretense unnecessary. Physical intimacy, once a natural expression of their connection, became another casualty of their divergent paths. Exhaustion, scheduling conflicts, and emotional distance created a barrier that grew more formidable with each passing month. Their bedroom encounters became increasingly rare, a rushed mechanical exercise rather than the meaningful connection they'd once shared. Afterward, Nate would often return to work emails or fall immediately asleep, leaving Claire feeling more alone than before. Touch itself grew scarce beyond the perfunctory. The quick goodbye peck, the public handhold at events where appearance mattered, the casual physical affection that had once been constant. Nate's hand at the small of her back, Claire's fingers absently running. Through his hair as she passed his desk, their feet finding each other beneath the covers, faded away, leaving a void neither acknowledged aloud. One night, Claire reached for Nate's hand across the dinner table, a simple gesture seeking connection. He gave her fingers a quick squeeze before withdrawing to check an incoming message on his watch. The brief contact highlighted the absence of meaningful touch in their relationship. Their 5th anniversary arrived with minimal acknowledgement. Nate sent flowers to Claire's school, arranged by his assistant, and suggested dinner the following weekend when his schedule would clear. Claire placed the bouquet on her desk, remembering how they'd once celebrated monthly anniversaries because waiting a whole year to honor their love had seemed too long. That evening she opened the gift she'd purchased weeks earlier, a first-edition copy of the poetry collection they'd read together in college. The inscription she'd written now seemed painfully naive. To Nate, "May we find our way back to the conversations that brought us together." "All my love, Claire." She returned the book to its hiding place, unwrapped. The moment for such sentiments had passed, the shared reference point too distant to resonate. Later that night, as she prepared for bed alone, Claire caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked successful, polished, and utterly unfamiliar to herself. The woman who had once sat on the hood of Nate's car discussing philosophy under the stars had been replaced by someone who attended charity galas and maintained a perfect home for a husband who was never there. She wondered if Nate ever felt the same disconnect from his former self, or if his transformation had been so complete that no remnant of that idealistic student remained. She wondered, too, how much longer they could continue this performance of marriage without the substance to sustain it. As Claire slipped between the cool sheets of their king-sized bed, she faced the truth she'd been avoiding. Success had given them everything except what mattered most, each other. Claire sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the plastic test in her hand. 2 pink lines appeared, clear and undeniable. She reached for the second test. Same result. And the third, all positive. After 6 years of marriage, she was pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on her. Their 5-year plan had scheduled children after Rivtech was established, after they'd bought a house in a good school district, after they'd built a solid foundation. On paper, they had achieved those goals. Rivtech was thriving. Their condo was in the city's best district. Financially, they were more than stable, yet their marriage had never been more fragile. Claire placed a hand on her still flat stomach, emotions colliding within her. Joy, fear, hope, uncertainty. A baby would change everything. Perhaps this was exactly what they needed, a reason to reprioritize, to rebuild their connection. A baby, she whispered to the empty bathroom, testing how the word felt on her lips. The following week, during her first prenatal appointment, Claire received another shock. "Let's take a look," Dr. Winters said, moving the ultrasound wand across Claire's abdomen. She studied the screen, then smiled. "Well, Mrs. Rivera, I see why your hormone levels were so elevated." "Is something wrong?" Claire asked, anxiety tightening her chest. "Not at all. You're carrying twins." "Twins?" Claire repeated, momentarily unable to process the information. "Yes, see here." The doctor pointed to the screen. 2 separate amniotic sacs. 2 babies. Claire stared at the monitor, at the 2 tiny bean-shaped forms. 2 heartbeats, 2 lives growing inside her. Her children, hers and Nate's. "Is there a history of twins in your family?" the doctor asked. "My father's side," Claire answered automatically, still transfixed by the image on screen. "His sisters are identical twins." Driving home afterward, Claire pulled into a park and sat watching children play on the swings. Twins. The word kept echoing in her mind. Double the joy, double the challenge. She imagined 2 cribs in the guest room they'd convert to a nursery, 2 car seats, 2 high chairs. She imagined Nate holding both babies, one in each arm. That image gave her pause. When had she last seen Nate hold anything besides his phone or laptop? When had he last had time to sit still for more than a few minutes? Claire pushed the doubt away. This news would change things. It had to. She drove to a boutique baby store and purchased 2 tiny stuffed bears, one blue, one pink, and wrapped them in a box with the ultrasound picture. The perfect way to share the news with Nate. Claire planned a special dinner for that evening, preparing Nate's favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. She set the table with their wedding china, unused since they'd moved into the condo. She chilled a bottle of sparkling cider, arranging the wrapped gift box beside Nate's plate. Received his text. "Board meeting running late. Home by." Claire turned the oven to its lowest setting and waited. At 8:30, her phone chimed again, still stuck here. "Don't wait up." The salmon dried out. The vegetables cooled. Claire placed everything in the refrigerator, blew out the candles, and put away the gift. Tomorrow would be better. But the next day brought a crisis with the European server, keeping Nate at the office until midnight. The day after that, an emergency meeting with investors. Each morning, Claire woke determined to share her news. Each evening ended in disappointment. She considered simply texting him, "I'm pregnant with twins," but stopped herself. News this life-changing deserved more than a digital announcement squeezed between his business messages. After a week of failed attempts, Claire decided on a new approach. She made a lunch reservation at Nate's favorite restaurant near his office and texted his assistant directly. "Zara, I need to speak with Nate about something important. Can you clear his lunch tomorrow? I'll pick him up at 12:30. Zara replied promptly, "Done. I've blocked off 12:32 for you." The following day, Claire arrived at Rivtech's gleaming headquarters, gift box in hand. The receptionist greeted her by name and directed her to Nate's top-floor office. As she stepped off the elevator, she spotted him through the glass walls of the conference room, standing before a group of suited executives gesturing at a presentation screen. Zara approached with an apologetic expression. "Mrs. Rivera, I'm so sorry. The Nakamura representatives arrived early. Mr. Rivera asked if you could wait in his office. The meeting shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Claire nodded, swallowing her disappointment. Of course. Nate's corner office offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Awards and business magazine covers featuring him lined the walls. On his desk sat a single framed photo. Claire and Nate on their wedding day, both laughing as they fed each other cake. She picked it up, studying their younger faces, remembering how simple everything had seemed then. 30 minutes stretched to an hour. Claire watched through the glass as Nate continued speaking, his audience leaning forward, captivated. This was his element now, commanding rooms, making decisions, building his empire. After 90 minutes, she set the gift box on his desk and wrote a note, important news to share. "Call me when you're free." She slipped out without interrupting his meeting, the rejection stinging despite its impersonal nature. Nate called that evening as she graded papers at the kitchen table. "Claire, I'm sorry about lunch. The Nakamura meeting was crucial. They're considering a major investment." "It's fine," she replied, though it wasn't. "When will you be home?" "That's why I'm calling. I need to fly to San Francisco tonight. The development team there is having integration issues with the new platform. I should be back tomorrow night." "Can it wait until I'm back? My car's waiting to take me to the airport." She hesitated. "I suppose one more day won't matter. Thanks for understanding. I'll call you tomorrow." San Francisco became 3 days instead of 1. By the time Nate returned, Claire had begun experiencing morning sickness, rushing to the bathroom before dawn each day. Still, she waited for the right moment, unwilling to share life-changing news in a hurried conversation between his meetings. 2 weeks after discovering her pregnancy, Claire still hadn't found the right moment to tell Nate. One evening, as they passed each other in the kitchen, Claire preparing dinner, Nate grabbing coffee before returning to his home office, he made an announcement that froze her in place. "The Singapore deal is in trouble. I need to fly out tonight." Claire set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. "Tonight? For how long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. "Wong Enterprises is threatening to back out unless we address their security concerns in person. This deal would open the entire Southeast Asian market for us." 3 weeks? Claire repeated, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "That's a long time, Nate." He was already checking flight information on his phone. "It can't be helped. This deal is worth hundreds of millions. I've got Zara booking my flight now." "Nate, wait." Claire stepped toward him. "I have something important to tell you before you go." His phone chimed with a new message. He glanced at it, then back at her with obvious impatience. "Can it wait? My flight's in 3 hours and I still need to pack." In that moment, Claire made a decision that would alter the course of their lives. Looking at her husband, distracted, already mentally in Singapore, his body language screaming that he had no space for her news, she stepped back. "Go pack," she said quietly. "We'll talk when you get back." Nate nodded, relief evident, as he headed for their bedroom. An hour later, bag packed and waiting by the door, he kissed her goodbye. "I'll call when I land," he promised. Claire watched from the window as his car pulled away, taking with it her last hope that Nate might choose their family over Rivtech. She placed a hand on her stomach, whispering to the twins growing inside her, "Looks like it's just us for now." The days stretched into weeks. Nate's video calls came at odd hours due to the time difference. Brief conversations focused almost entirely on business developments. Claire considered telling him about the pregnancy remotely, but held back. Such news deserved more than a pixelated announcement across time zones. As her first trimester progressed, morning sickness intensified. She took sick days from school, something she'd rarely done before. Her department colleagues noticed the change in her appearance, the pallor, the careful way she moved, her sudden aversion to the staff room coffee. "Are you pregnant?" Monica asked bluntly one afternoon, closing Claire's office door for privacy. Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Twins. Almost 11 weeks now." Monica's excitement faded as she processed Claire's subdued response. "Nate doesn't know, does he?" "No. He's been in Singapore for almost a month. Claire, you need to tell him." "I will, when he gets back." But Nate's return date kept shifting as complications with the deal emerged. 2 weeks became 4, then 6. Claire entered her second trimester, the morning sickness easing as a small but noticeable bump appeared. She scheduled another ultrasound, learning that she carried a boy and a girl. She began researching names, nursery designs, childcare options, all alone, all without Nate's input. Each night she added new information to the journal she'd started, addressing entries to her absent husband, creating a record of all he was missing. "Today I felt them move for the first time," she wrote one evening, "like butterflies inside me. I wonder if you'll be home before they're strong enough for you to feel them too." After 8 weeks, Nate finally returned from Singapore, triumphant. The Wong Enterprises deal had succeeded beyond expectations, opening new markets across Asia. He arrived home bearing gifts, a silk scarf for Claire, exotic teas, carved figurines, souvenirs of a business victory that had kept him away for 2 months of her pregnancy. Claire heard his key in the lock and stood from the couch, her loose dress doing little to hide the changes in her body. She watched as he entered, saw the moment his eyes registered her transformation, watched shock replace his smile. "Claire?" His gaze dropped to her stomach, the suitcase slipping from his hand. "Welcome home," she said simply. Nate stepped forward, disbelief evident in every movement. "You're pregnant?" "Yes, 16 weeks now. 16, he calculated backward. "You knew before I left for Singapore?" Claire nodded, watching emotions cross his face, surprise, joy, confusion, and finally, hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice dropping. "I tried, Nate, For 2 weeks before you left, I tried to find a moment when you weren't rushing off to a meeting or glued to your phone or too exhausted to talk. You could have told me before I left for Singapore. You had the chance right before I walked out the door." "The chance?" Claire repeated, her calm facade cracking. "Our babies deserved more than an announcement squeezed between your packing and a cab ride. They deserved a father who had time to hear the news, to process it, to celebrate it." Nate ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling. "So instead, you let me miss 4 months of your pregnancy? That was your solution?" "I made a choice," Claire acknowledged. "Maybe it wasn't the right one. But when you rushed off to Singapore without a second thought, you made a choice too." She walked to the kitchen drawer and removed the gift box she'd prepared months ago, now dusty from waiting. She handed it to him silently. Nate opened it, finding the 2 small stuffed bears and the first ultrasound image. He stared at the picture, then back at Claire. "Twins?" he whispered. "A boy and a girl." He sank onto the couch, the reality finally hitting him. "Claire, I don't know what to say. There's something else you should know," Claire continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The doctor says my blood pressure is concerning. I need to reduce stress, rest more. I'll have to take leave from teaching earlier than planned." Nate nodded, still processing. "Of course, whatever you need. I'll make sure you have the best care available." "What I need," Claire said carefully, "is a husband who's present. A father for these children who prioritizes family over business." "I do prioritize our family," Nate insisted. "Everything I've built for us." "No, Nate, you've built it for yourself, for your vision. Our family has become an abstract concept to you, something you'll attend to someday when Rivtech doesn't need you. But these babies are coming in 5 months, ready or not." Nate stood, approaching her with outstretched hands. "Things will change now. I promise. I'll adjust my schedule, delegate more responsibilities, like you promised after the Miller contract, after your first expansion, after every milestone that was supposed to make things easier but somehow made you less available." He flinched at the accuracy of her assessment. "This is different. These are our children. Yes, they are. And they'll need a father who shows up, not just financially but physically and emotionally. Can you be that father, Nate? Can you step back from being CEO long enough to be a parent?" Nate hesitated, just long enough for Claire to see the truth. His phone chimed with a notification and his eyes flickered toward it reflexively. "That right there," Claire said softly. "That's your answer. It could be important," he defended. "It's always important, Nate. It's always urgent. It's always the deal that can't wait, the crisis that only you can solve." She placed both hands on her stomach. "But these babies won't wait for Rivtech's quarterly projections to improve or for the Asian market to stabilize. They're coming, and they'll need both of us." Nate's expression hardened slightly. "You're asking me to choose between my company and our family." "No," Claire corrected him. "I'm asking you to make room for both. But if you can't, if Rivtech will always come first, then I need to know now before these children arrive." The silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of decisions yet unmade. Every relationship faces defining moments, crossroads where values clash and priorities compete. Nate and Claire have reached such a moment, forced to confront the fundamental question, what matters most? Have you ever faced a similar breaking point in a relationship? That moment when you realized something had to change, that the path you were on was leading away from what you truly valued. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What non-negotiable values form the foundation of your most important relationships? Where would you draw the line if those values were compromised? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might provide valuable perspective for someone facing their own relationship crossroads right now. If this story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. On the Mr. Ross Story Trail, we believe that by exploring these challenging human moments together, we find wisdom for our own journeys. Now, let's return to Claire and Nate as they face the consequences of their choices, decisions that will forever alter the course of their family's future. The week following their confrontation passed in tense silence. Nate made gestures toward change, coming home earlier, asking about her prenatal appointments, researching cribs online. But each attempt felt mechanical, as though he were adding expectant father to his list of roles to perform, rather than embracing the fundamental shift their lives required. The breaking point came during what should have been a joyful moment. Claire had scheduled the anatomy scan ultrasound, where they would see detailed images of the twins. She marked the date on their shared calendar, confirmed with Nate twice that he would attend, and even received assurance from Zara that his schedule was clear. She waited in the doctor's office lobby, checking her watch repeatedly as the appointment time approached. 5 minutes before they were called in, her phone rang. "I can't make it," Nate said without preamble. "The Peterson contract has issues with the liability clause. Their legal team is threatening to walk." Claire closed her eyes, absorbing the familiar disappointment. This appointment has been scheduled for weeks, Nate. I know, and I'm sorry. I tried to delegate it, but they specifically requested me. Millions of dollars are at stake. And what's at stake here? She asked quietly. I'll make it up to you, he promised. Ask them to record it. I'll watch it tonight. Claire ended the call without responding. When the technician called her name, she entered the examination room alone, fighting back tears as she saw both babies on the monitor, active, healthy, and unknown to their father. That evening, she sat at their dining table writing a letter while Nate worked late again. The words came slowly, painfully, each one weighted with the finality of her decision. I can't raise our children in the shadow of your ambition, she wrote. They deserve to be priorities, not afterthoughts. I hope someday you remember what truly matters. She packed essentials into 2 suitcases, clothes, personal items, the ultrasound photos, and the journal she'd been keeping. She called a car service rather than taking her own vehicle, wanting to leave as little disruption as possible. Part of her still hoped Nate would arrive home in time to stop her, to say the words that might change everything. He didn't. As the car pulled away from the building that had never truly felt like home, Claire watched the city lights blur through her tears. One hand rested protectively on her growing belly. We'll be okay, she whispered to her unborn children. We'll build something new. She directed the driver to her parents' house in Meadowbrook, the suburb where she'd grown up. They welcomed her without questions, creating space in their lives just as they'd always done. That night, in her childhood bedroom, Claire grieved for the marriage she'd believed in and the future they'd planned together. In the morning, she would begin again, but tonight she allowed herself to mourn. Nate returned home after midnight to find the apartment unnaturally still. He called Claire's name, receiving only silence in response. In their bedroom, he discovered her letter on his pillow, the handwriting instantly recognizable. He read it once, twice, disbelief turning to anger with each word. How could she make such a drastic decision without discussing it? How could she simply walk away from everything they'd built together? His first response was fury. He called her repeatedly, each unanswered ring fueling his indignation. When her phone eventually went to voicemail, he left a message that wavered between pleading and demanding. You can't just disappear with my children, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Call me back, Claire. We need to talk about this like adults. When morning came with no response, Nate channeled his turmoil into action. He contacted his company's legal department, inquiring about his rights regarding unborn children. He called Claire's school, only to learn she had requested personal leave effective immediately. He even drove to her friend Monica's house, convinced Claire might be hiding there. She's not here, Monica told him, blocking her doorway. And even if I knew where she was, I wouldn't tell you. She needs space, Nate. Space? She's carrying my children. Monica's expression hardened. Children you couldn't make time for until they became inconvenient to your schedule. That comment lodged like a barb in his consciousness, impossible to dislodge despite his attempts to dismiss it. He retreated to his office, burying himself in work as he always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. Days passed without contact. Nate's anger gradually gave way to worry, then to a defensive self-justification. Hadn't he provided everything Claire could want? The beautiful home, financial security, status, all created through his relentless work ethic. Yes, he'd missed one appointment, but that didn't justify her disappearance. When Claire finally called a week later, Nate answered on the first ring. Where are you? He demanded. I'm safe, she replied, her voice calm but distant. I'm staying with my parents for now. You can't just take my children and vanish, Claire. There are legal implications to what you've done. Her silence at his threat spoke volumes. Are you coming back? He asked, his tone softening slightly. No, she answered simply. Not unless something fundamental changes. Meaning what? That I abandon the company I've spent years building? That I throw away everything we've worked toward? Meaning you recognize that Rivtech isn't everything, Claire replied. That family deserves more than whatever time is left after work is done. Nate's pride flared. You're giving me an ultimatum? Choose between my life's work and you. I'm asking you to make room for both, Claire corrected him. But you've consistently shown that's impossible for you. That's not fair, he protested. I've given you everything, except yourself, she said quietly. And that's the only thing that ever mattered to me. The conversation ended in stalemate, neither willing to concede their position. Nate, convinced he was the wrong party, refused to acknowledge how his choices had contributed to their breakdown. Claire, protecting her children and herself, refused to return to a marriage that existed only in the margins of Nate's ambition. Pride prevented Nate from seeing the simple truth, that the empire he'd built meant nothing without someone to share it with. Instead, he retreated further into the identity that felt most secure, successful CEO, visionary leader, businessman extraordinaire, letting his personal loss fuel his professional drive. The legal end of their marriage unfolded with the same absence of connection that had characterized its final years. Paperwork traveled between attorneys. Terms were negotiated through intermediaries. The intimate relationship that had begun with shared dreams dissolved into asset divisions and contractual language. Claire asked for little in the settlement, only enough to purchase a modest home in her hometown and support to cover the children's future needs. She wanted no ongoing financial ties to Nate beyond what was necessary for the twins. "She's entitled to half of everything," Nate's attorney advised during a private consultation. "The company value alone would set her up for life. If that's what she wanted, she wouldn't have left," Nate replied, signing the papers that granted her request without modification. Claire's attorney was equally perplexed. "Mrs. Rivera, given the value of Rivtech and the duration of your marriage, you could claim substantially more." "I don't want his money," Claire explained, "just a clean break and support for our children." Neither lawyer fully understood that the dissolution wasn't about finances, but about values that had become irreconcilably different. No settlement could address the fundamental breach: Nate's inability to place family above business and Claire's unwillingness to accept the leftovers of his attention. Throughout the proceedings, they communicated only through legal channels. Nate never asked directly about the pregnancy, assuming Claire would have notified him of any complications. Claire never volunteered updates, interpreting his silence as continued indifference to the children she carried. The final papers were signed without them ever being in the same room. Claire's signature, once flowing and confident, appeared shaky on the documents, the physical manifestation of her emotional state as she formalized the end of a relationship that had once been the center of her life. Nate signed his name with the same precise strokes he used on business contracts, maintaining the outward composure that had become his trademark. Only Zara noticed that he locked his office door afterward, canceling meetings for the remainder of the day. An unprecedented deviation from his rigorous schedule. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks before Claire's due date. The timing was not lost on either of them, though neither reached out to acknowledge it. Their marriage ended officially just as their children's lives were about to begin. A transition from one chapter to another, the pages between them closed forever. Or so they believed. Claire gave birth to Charlotte and Oliver on a clear spring morning, with her mother and Monica by her side. The delivery was difficult, the twins arriving 6 weeks early, requiring a brief stay in the NICU. Throughout those challenging first days, Claire never considered contacting Nate, convinced he had chosen his path just as she had chosen hers. When she finally brought the twins home to the small 3-bedroom house she'd purchased in Meadowbrook, Claire began the careful work of building a life focused entirely on her children. She arranged her teaching schedule to maximize her time with them, accepted her parents' eager help, and created routines that brought stability to their unconventional family unit. As the twins grew from infants to toddlers, Claire watched their personalities emerge with fascination. Charlotte, born 7 minutes before her brother, approached the world with fearless curiosity. She crawled earlier, walked earlier, and spoke in complete sentences by her 2nd birthday. Oliver developed more deliberately, observing before acting, listening before speaking, his quiet thoughtfulness a counterpoint to his sister's exuberance. Both inherited traits from their absent father, though Claire rarely acknowledged this aloud. Charlotte had Nate's drive and confidence, his ability to charm everyone she met. Oliver possessed his analytical mind, his attention to detail, his capacity for intense focus. On their 3rd birthday, Oliver built a tower of blocks that stood taller than he did, carefully testing each placement for stability. "Like Daddy?" he asked Claire, his first reference to the father she mentioned only in passing. Claire froze momentarily before finding her voice. "Yes, your daddy is good at building things too." "Where is he?" Charlotte demanded, never one to leave a question unasked. "He's away," Claire answered, the explanation she'd settled on, neither a lie nor the complete truth. As the children grew, these questions became more frequent, more specific. Claire developed answers that honored their right to know about their father without revealing the painful reality of his absence. "Your daddy works very far away," she would explain. "He builds things that help people. Does he know about us?" Charlotte asked on their 4th birthday, perceptive beyond her years. Claire considered the question carefully. "He knows you exist," she said finally, "but he made choices that took him in a different direction." She never spoke ill of Nate, never portrayed him as a villain in their story. She kept photos of him in a box in her closet, occasionally looking through them alone, wondering if she'd made the right decisions. Claire rebuilt her professional life alongside her personal one, eventually completing her master's degree in education through night classes while her parents watched the twins. She was promoted to lead curriculum development for the district, a role that allowed her to work primarily from home. Her colleagues marveled at her ability to balance career and single parenthood, unaware of the nights she spent working after the twins were asleep, the careful budgeting that made their comfortable life possible. When the twins started pre-kindergarten, Claire joined a support group for single parents where she formed friendships that sustained her through the challenges of raising children alone. She dated occasionally, a professor from her master's program, a widowed father from the twins' school, but these relationships remained casual, secondary to the family she'd created. 5 years after leaving Nate, Claire had constructed a life that was genuinely hers, not defined by her marriage or its ending, but by the choices she'd made since. She found joy in her children's development, satisfaction in her work, and an identity independent of the woman who had once organized her existence around her husband's ambitions. While Claire built a life centered around family, Nate constructed an empire. Rivtech expanded exponentially, opening offices across 3 continents, acquiring competitors, and developing proprietary technologies that revolutionized data management. Industry publications featured Nate on their covers. Business schools used Rivtech as a case study in explosive growth and market disruption. Nate moved from their condo to a sprawling penthouse with views of the entire city. He replaced his luxury sedan with a collection of exotic cars. His wardrobe evolved from department store suits to bespoke attire from European tailors. He dated models, actresses, and fellow executives, relationships that rarely lasted beyond a few months, terminated when they began to demand time he wasn't willing to give. The divorce had fueled rather than diminished his drive. He channeled his anger and hurt into 60-hour work weeks, international expansion, aggressive acquisitions. Success became his vindication, proof that his priorities had been correct all along. Yet in quiet moments, rare though they were, Nate found himself wondering about the children Claire had been carrying. Had she had a boy or girl? Were they healthy? Did they have his eyes or Claire's smile? These thoughts would surface unexpectedly, usually late at night when the penthouse felt particularly empty, its perfect design emphasizing the absence of life within its walls. Once, during a routine physical, his doctor asked about family medical history. "Any children, Mr. Rivera?" Nate hesitated. "Not that I'm involved with," he finally answered, the words leaving a bitter taste. He never corrected the media stories that described him as childless, never mentioned the twins to anyone, eventually convincing himself that Claire had likely moved on completely, perhaps remarried, perhaps even terminated the pregnancy after their split. The possibility that he had children somewhere became an abstract concept rather than an emotional reality. On the 5th anniversary of their divorce, Nate found himself alone in his office late at night, scrolling through old photos on his private server. Images of Claire appeared on his screen. Claire laughing during their honeymoon, Claire asleep with a book on her chest, Claire in the early days of Rivtech helping him prepare for investor meetings. He closed the folder quickly, returning to the quarterly projections that demanded his attention. The past was immutable. Only the future, Rivtech's future, mattered now. Yet that night, as he stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city he'd conquered, Nate realized that his success echoed in empty rooms. The empire he'd built housed no joy, no connection, no purpose beyond its own expansion. Everyone in his life served a function: employees, partners, investors, brief companions. No one knew him beyond his carefully constructed persona. The realization lasted only a moment before he pushed it aside, returning to the comfort of spreadsheets and strategy documents, the world where he maintained complete control, where emotions remained safely irrelevant, where success had clear metrics unrelated to human connection. In the morning, he announced Rivtech's most ambitious expansion yet, a complete vertical integration that would position them to dominate the market for decades to come. His team applauded the vision, investors celebrated the potential returns, and business channels praised his strategic genius. No one noticed the hollowness behind his confident smile, or questioned whether the man who had everything might in fact have nothing at all. 5 years after their divorce, Claire settled into a comfortable routine with the twins. Weekday mornings meant rushed breakfasts and school drop-offs, afternoons brought homework supervision and activities, evenings were reserved for family dinner and bedtime stories. Her days operated with the predictable rhythm she'd once lacked during her marriage to Nate. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier rather than regular mail. The Rivtech logo embossed on heavy cream cardstock caught Claire's eye immediately. She set aside the stack of student essays she'd been grading and examined the unexpected delivery. Inside was an elegantly designed invitation to Rivtech's 10th anniversary gala, to be held at the Grand Westlake Hotel in 3 weeks' time. The formal request for her attendance came printed on textured paper with gold lettering, but it was the handwritten note clipped to it that made her breath catch. "Mr. Riviera specifically requested your inclusion on the guest list. He asked that I mention this event will recognize all who contributed to Rivtech's journey. Zara Henley, executive assistant to the CEO." Claire read the note twice, trying to decipher its actual meaning. Was this Nate's attempt at reconciliation, a business courtesy, or something else entirely? She placed the invitation on her kitchen counter, where it remained untouched for days, commanding attention each time she passed. The twins noticed it during breakfast on Thursday morning. "What's that shiny paper, Mommy?" Charlotte asked, reaching for it with jam-sticky fingers. Claire moved it beyond her reach. "Just an invitation to a party." "Can we go?" Oliver asked quietly. "It's a grown-up party," Claire explained, tucking the invitation into a drawer. That night, after the children were asleep, she removed it again, studying the details. 10 years of Rivtech, a decade since those early days when Nate worked from their tiny apartment, when they shared dreams and struggles equally. A decade that had transformed them both into people who might not recognize their former selves. Her finger traced the embossed logo. Attending meant facing Nate again after 5 years of silence. Declining meant continuing the pattern of avoidance they'd established. Neither option felt entirely right. For days, Claire's thoughts circled around the invitation. Each time she nearly decided to ignore it, a new consideration would arise, forcing her to reconsider. The professional side of her recognized the opportunity to show Nate she'd thrived without him, successful in her career, confident in her choices. Pride whispered that appearing at the gala would demonstrate strength, not weakness. The practical side listed reasons to decline: the need for childcare, the expense of appropriate attire, the emotional toll of revisiting the past. Self-preservation argued for maintaining the boundaries she'd established. But the mother in her considered different implications altogether. The twins were asking more questions about their father, questions that grew increasingly difficult to answer with vague explanations. "Does Daddy ever ask about us?" Oliver had inquired recently, his small face solemn. "Why doesn't he visit like Sam's dad does?" Charlotte demanded, referencing a classmate with divorced parents. Their curiosity was natural. Their questions deserved honest answers. Yet how could she explain a father who had never sought them out, who might not even know they existed? That thought stopped Claire cold. Had her justified anger led to an unjustifiable decision? By protecting the twins from Nate's indifference, had she denied them the chance to know their father, and him the opportunity to know them? She found herself in the twins' bedroom one night, watching them sleep. Charlotte sprawled across her bed, covers kicked away, hair wild across her pillow. Oliver curled neatly on his side, one hand tucked under his cheek, both with Nate's striking blue eyes, his determined chin, his analytical mind, children shaped by his genetics yet untouched by his presence. Claire retrieved her phone and took a photograph of them sleeping. She stared at the image, considering what it would mean to share it with Nate, to bridge the gap she had helped create. "What's right?" she whispered to the quiet room. Protecting them from disappointment or giving them the truth? The invitation remained unanswered as the days passed, its deadline for please reply approaching, while Claire weighed moral complexities against emotional realities. "You're seriously considering attending?" Layla asked, refilling their wine glasses as they sat on Claire's back patio. The twins were inside watching a movie, their occasional laughter drifting through the open windows. Layla had entered Claire's life through the single-parent support group 3 years earlier. Recently divorced herself, she brought a perspective Claire valued, direct, thoughtful, and unencumbered by history with either Claire or Nate. "I keep coming back to the same question," Claire admitted. "Do the twins have a right to know their father, and does he have a right to know them?" Layla considered this before responding. "Has he ever tried to find them? To find you? Not that I know of, but—" Claire hesitated. "I made it nearly impossible. I moved, changed my number. The divorce papers never mentioned the pregnancy." "Because you were protecting them," Layla reminded her. "Yes, but from what? From a man who didn't want children when they were abstract possibilities? He never rejected them as actual people. He never had the chance." Layla set down her wine. "Claire, are we talking about his rights or your guilt?" The question landed with uncomfortable precision. Claire had been carrying the weight of her decision for 5 years, the choice to leave without full disclosure, to raise the twins without giving Nate the opportunity to participate. "Maybe both," she admitted. "I was so hurt by his reaction to the pregnancy, so convinced he'd be an absent father at best. But what if I was wrong? What if he would have changed if he'd actually met them?" "That's a big what-if to base a decision on," Layla cautioned. "And bringing the twins to this gala, that's a public setting for what should be an intensely private moment." Claire nodded. "I know, but there's something about the symmetry of it, confronting him during a celebration of the company that came between us. And practically speaking, it might be the only chance I get. Who knows if he'd agree to meet privately?" Layla reached across the table to squeeze Claire's hand. "He doesn't know they exist, Claire. Don't you think he deserves to know his children? And don't they deserve to know their father, even if he disappoints them?" That night, after Layla left, Claire found herself looking at old photos from her marriage. One in particular caught her attention. Nate helping his young nephew build a tower of blocks, his expression gentle, patient, completely different from the driven CEO he'd become. Perhaps that man still existed somewhere beneath the ambition and success. Perhaps the twins deserved the chance to discover him for themselves. Once Claire made her decision, she faced an even more challenging task, preparing Charlotte and Oliver to meet the father they knew only through carefully edited stories. She began gradually, introducing more details about Nate during their evening conversations. She showed them photos of him from their college days and early marriage, explaining how he'd grown up in the city, how he loved building things, how determined he could be. "Your daddy created a very successful company," she explained one evening as they sat on the living room floor, looking through albums she'd kept hidden for years. "He works very hard helping businesses solve problems." "Is that why he's away?" Oliver asked, tracing Nate's face in a wedding photo. "Partly," Claire answered truthfully. "Does he know what I look like?" Charlotte demanded. Claire hesitated. "No, sweetheart. He hasn't seen you since you were in my tummy. Why not?" The question came from both twins simultaneously. Claire had prepared for this, deciding that age-appropriate truth was better than comforting fiction. "Your daddy and I had different ideas about what was important. I thought family should come first. He needed to focus on his company. Doesn't he want to meet us?" Oliver's voice was small. "I think he would want to know you very much if he understood what amazing children you are," Claire said carefully. "And soon he'll have that chance." She explained about the upcoming party, about how they would dress up and go to the city where their father lived. She prepared them without promising outcomes she couldn't guarantee. Nate might be thrilled to discover them, or he might react with anger, confusion, even rejection. The twins processed this information differently. Charlotte bombarded Claire with questions. Would he like her? Would he be impressed that she could already read chapter books? Would he take them to his office with the computers Mommy had described? Oliver grew quieter, watching, listening, drawing pictures of a tall man holding hands with two small figures, his way of processing emotions too complex for his vocabulary. 2 days before the gala, Claire took them shopping for special outfits. A navy blue dress for Charlotte that matched her eyes, a small suit for Oliver that he insisted on wearing with a bow tie like the scientists on TV. "Will Daddy know it's us?" Oliver asked as Claire helped him try on his suit. "He'll know," Claire promised, smoothing his collar. "You have his eyes." The day of the gala arrived with clear skies and Claire's nerves strung tight as piano wire. She styled the twins' hair, adjusted their outfits, rehearsed basic etiquette for the formal setting they would enter. Her own preparation felt secondary, a blue dress chosen primarily because it complemented the twins' eyes rather than flattered her figure. Layla arrived to drive them to the city, offering moral support and a practical exit strategy if needed. "I'll keep the car nearby," she promised. "One text and I'll come get you all." As they approached Westlake, the cityscape grew more imposing. 5-year-old Oliver pressed his face against the car window, counting the floors of skyscrapers. Charlotte chatted excitedly, her nervous energy manifesting in non-stop questions. "Will there be other kids? Will there be cake? Will Daddy have presents for us? Will his house be bigger than ours?" Claire answered patiently, managing her own anxiety while soothing theirs. "Remember what we talked about," she reminded them. "This is a grown-up party, so we need to use our best manners. And meeting your father might feel strange at first, for all of us." "What if he doesn't like us?" Oliver whispered, voicing the fear Claire had been trying to ignore. She turned in her seat to meet his worried gaze. "That's not possible. You're both too wonderful not to love." The Grand Westlake Hotel loomed ahead, its entrance crowded with luxury vehicles and attendees in formal attire. Claire's grip tightened on her small clutch purse as Layla pulled up to the valet stand. "You don't have to do this," Layla reminded her as they sat in the idle car. "You can still change your mind." Claire looked at her children, then at the hotel where Nate was celebrating his decade of success. Success built during the same years she'd raised their children alone. "No," she said firmly. "It's time for truth, whatever comes from it." They exited the car, the twins holding Claire's hands on either side. The doorman smiled at the children, ushering them into the opulent lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Charlotte gasped at the grandeur while Oliver moved closer to Claire's side, overwhelmed by the scale and noise. Following signs for the Rivtech celebration, they approached the ballroom entrance where a staff member checked names against the guest list. "Claire Rivera," she stated, the surname feeling foreign after 5 years of returning to Winters. The attendant found her name, nodded professionally, and gestured toward the open ballroom doors. "Mr. Rivera is giving welcome remarks near the main stage." Claire paused at the threshold, gathering her courage as the sounds of celebration washed over them. She could see Nate across the crowded room, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by admirers as he gestured animatedly during what appeared to be an impromptu speech. "Is that him?" Charlotte whispered, following Claire's gaze. "Yes," Claire confirmed. That's your father. She took a deep breath, squeezed her children's hands, and stepped forward into the moment that would change all their lives forever. Ready? She asked, looking down at the twins. They nodded, expressions solemn yet curious. Together, they began moving through the crowd toward the man who had never held them, never known them, yet whose blood ran in their veins and whose features shaped their faces. With each step, Claire's heartbeat quickened. There would be no turning back after this, no maintaining the careful separation she'd constructed between their worlds. Whatever happened next would forever alter the story of their family. The distance between them shortened, 20 feet, 10 feet, close enough now to hear Nate's voice over the crowd. And you know what they say, sometimes you have to sacrifice to succeed. His familiar laugh carried across the space between them. My ex-wife never understood that. She wanted everything without the hard work. Claire stopped abruptly, the casual cruelty of his words washing over her. The twins looked up at her, confused by the sudden halt. In that moment, doubt threatened to overwhelm her resolve. Was this a mistake? Would exposing the twins to this man only hurt them in the end? Then Charlotte tugged at her hand impatiently, and Oliver squeezed her fingers in silent support. These children, so wise, so brave, so deserving of truth, gave her the final push she needed. Claire straightened her shoulders and continued forward, stepping into the circle surrounding Nate just as laughter rippled through his audience. Is that what happened, Nate? She asked, her voice clear and steady. I wanted everything without the hard work? Time seemed to stop as Nate turned toward Claire's voice. The champagne glass suspended in his hand, his confident smile vanishing as recognition dawned in his eyes. The crowded ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and black-tie guests, faded into background noise. Claire, he managed, his voice barely audible over the orchestra. She stood before him, elegant in her simple blue dress, chin raised slightly, a posture he remembered from their most difficult arguments years ago. But it wasn't Claire alone who caused all color to drain from his face. It was the two small children flanking her, their striking blue eyes, his eyes, regarding him with unmistakable curiosity. The circle of executives and investors around Nate shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unaware of its magnitude. A few recognized Claire from years past, when she had attended company functions as Nate's wife. None had ever seen the children. I didn't expect to see you here, Nate continued, attempting to regain his composure, his gaze fixed on the twins. Clearly, Claire replied evenly. I received your invitation. I thought perhaps you might want to meet some people. She gently guided the children forward, her hands protective on their shoulders. This is Charlotte, she said, indicating the girl who stood confidently in her navy dress. And this is Oliver. The boy partially concealed himself behind Claire's skirt, though his eyes never left Nate's face. Nate's expression transformed from shock to disbelief to dawning comprehension. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up, all attention fixed on the tableau before them. My children? He whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. Your children, Claire confirmed. They're 5 years old. The murmurs began instantly, spreading through the ballroom like ripples in still water. Phones appeared as guests discreetly captured the moment. Executive board members exchanged glances, processing the implications for company leadership and public image. Charlotte, bold as ever, stepped forward. Are you our father? Mom says you've been away. The simple question seemed to physically impact Nate. He staggered slightly, steadying himself against a nearby cocktail table. The practiced poise of the billionaire CEO crumbled, revealing the stunned man beneath. Zara materialized at his side, ever the efficient protector of Rivtech's image. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, she suggested, her professional demeanor concealing her own shock at the situation. Private. Yes, Nate agreed, his voice hoarse. He couldn't tear his gaze from the children, his children, standing before him like apparitions made flesh. Zara efficiently cleared a path through the increasingly curious crowd, leading them toward a conference room adjacent to the ballroom. As they walked, Nate's mind raced with calculations. 5 years since the divorce, plus 9 months of pregnancy. The twins would have been born shortly after their separation. Claire had been pregnant when she left. The realization staggered him. She had been carrying his children while he flew to Singapore, while he prioritized the Wong Enterprises deal, while he chose Rivtech over their marriage. Inside the conference room, silence descended. Zara asked if they needed anything before quietly closing the door, leaving the fractured family alone. Nate sank into a chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. 5 years, he said, his voice breaking. They're 5 years old, and I didn't know they existed. Claire guided the twins to seats across from him. You made it clear you didn't want children when I told you I was pregnant, she replied. What was I supposed to do? Tell me anyway. His voice rose before he caught himself, noticing Oliver flinch at the volume. He lowered his tone. Let me make that choice for myself. I had a right to know. Charlotte observed this exchange with keen interest, her gaze bouncing between the adults. Unlike her brother's caution, her curiosity overcame any hesitation. Why didn't you visit us? She asked Nate directly. All the other dads come for school things. Nate's expression crumpled. How could he explain to a 5-year-old what he was still struggling to understand himself? I didn't know where you were, he said finally, the simplest version of a complicated truth. Didn't you look for us? Oliver's quiet question, his first contribution to the conversation, cut deeper than his sister's bold inquiry. Nate's eyes met Claire's across the table, silently asking how to navigate this minefield of innocent questions with their razor-sharp edges. Your father and I made choices that kept us apart, Claire explained gently. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that have consequences they don't expect, like when I chose to jump in the puddle even though you said my shoes would get wet. Charlotte asked. Despite everything, a smile tugged at Claire's lips. Something like that, but much more complicated. Nate leaned forward, studying the children with wonder. They were so clearly a blend of himself and Claire. Charlotte with his confidence and determination. Oliver with Claire's thoughtfulness and perceptiveness. Both with his blue eyes and Claire's gentle smile. You look like your mother, he said softly, but I can see myself in you too. Mom says I'm determined like you, Charlotte declared proudly. And that Oliver is smart with computers like you. She talks about me. Nate couldn't hide his surprise. Sometimes, Oliver offered. When we ask, she has pictures in a box. Claire met Nate's questioning gaze. I never wanted them to think badly of you. Whatever happened between us, you're still their father. The word father hung in the air between them. A title Nate had technically held for 5 years without knowing it, without earning it, without living up to its responsibilities or experiencing its joys. Outside the conference room, the gala continued, but the focus had shifted entirely. Whispers circulated about the dramatic confrontation and the CEO's hidden children. Speculation ran wild about potential impacts on Riftex's leadership, stock price, and public image. Some guests discreetly contacted business journalists with tips about the unfolding drama. Inside the conference room, time seemed suspended as Nate attempted to process the magnitude of what had been hidden from him and what he had missed. Why now? He finally asked Claire. Why bring them here tonight? Claire considered her answer carefully. Because they deserve better than a father who doesn't know they exist. And despite everything, I believed you deserve to know them too. 5 years, Nate repeated, the number representing countless lost moments, first words, first steps, first days of school. I've missed everything. Yes, Claire acknowledged without apology. You have. Their conversation was repeatedly interrupted by the twins' innocent questions. Charlotte wanted to know if Nate's office really had glass walls like Mom had described. Oliver asked if he still built computer programs. Their natural curiosity punctured the tension, preventing the adults from diving too deeply into recriminations. Zara knocked briefly before entering with a tray of juice for the children and water for the adults. Mr. Rivera, the board members are asking when you'll return to the gala, she said quietly. Nate waved her concern away. Tell them I've been detained by an urgent family matter. The word family fell awkwardly from his lips, new and unfamiliar in its current context. After Zara departed, Nate leaned forward. Claire, we need to discuss what happens next. These are my children. I want to be part of their lives. Now you want to be involved, Claire noted, her tone neutral rather than accusatory. After 5 years of absence I didn't choose, he countered. You made that decision for all of us, and you made decisions that led us there, she replied. Let's not pretend the situation has a single cause. The twins, sensing the rising tension, grew restless. Charlotte slid from her chair to explore the conference room while Oliver remained seated, watching the adults with solemn attention. Look, a robot, Charlotte exclaimed, pointing to a display model of Rivtech's automated data processing unit on a side table. Her excitement created a momentary pause in the confrontation. Nate turned toward his daughter, instinctively responding to her interest. That's one of our data processing systems, he explained, slipping into the familiar role of presenting his technology. It helps companies organize information. Charlotte approached the model without hesitation. Can I touch it? Of course, Nate replied, watching as she examined the device with surprising care. Oliver would like this, she declared. He builds robots with his blocks. At the mention of his name, Oliver looked up. Nate turned his attention to his son, seeing beyond the initial shyness to the keen intelligence in his eyes. Do you like robots, Oliver? He asked gently. The boy nodded. I'm going to build real ones someday, with moving parts and thinking brains. I believe you will, Nate said, genuine warmth in his voice for the first time since their encounter began. As the twins became absorbed in examining the technology display, Claire and Nate continued their conversation in lowered voices. I want regular visitation, Nate stated, businesslike despite the personal nature of the discussion. I've missed 5 years. I won't miss any more. Claire studied him, searching for evidence that his interest went beyond possession or pride.
Parenting isn't a business acquisition, Nate.
It's not something you can schedule between meetings or delegate when you're busy. I know that, he replied defensively. Do you? Your entire adult life has been structured around Rivtech's needs. Children don't conform to corporate calendars. They get sick on the day of important meetings. They have nightmares at 3 a.m. They need consistency, not occasional appearances when it's convenient. Nate ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it for perhaps the first time in years. You think I can't change? That I can't make room for them? I think you've never had to, Claire answered honestly. Your priorities have always been clear. That's unfair, he protested. You never gave me the chance to choose them. You decided I wouldn't be a good father and removed the possibility entirely. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Claire had justified her decision countless times in her mind, but hearing Nate frame it so directly forced her to confront the magnitude of what she'd done. You're right, she admitted, surprising them both. I made a choice based on your reaction to my pregnancy and your pattern of behavior in our marriage. I convinced myself I was protecting them from disappointment, but perhaps I was punishing you too. Nate hadn't expected this concession. He'd prepared for defense, for accusations, for the Claire who had walked away from their marriage. This Claire, reflective, acknowledging her own role in their estrangement, disarmed him completely. I would have stepped up, he said quietly. If I'd known about them, I would have been there. Would you? Claire challenged. Or would you have hired nannies and assistants to be there instead? Would you have restructured your company, delegated responsibilities, limited your travel? Because that's what being a father requires. Nate had no immediate answer. The question forced him to examine not what he would have said, but what he would have done, and the distinction mattered. I don't know, he finally admitted, but I deserve the opportunity to try. In that moment of raw honesty, something shifted between them. The polished, controlled exteriors they'd both maintained cracked slightly, revealing the hurt, regret, and longing beneath. Yes, Claire agreed softly. You did. While the adults navigated their complex emotions, the twins processed the encounter in their own way. Meeting their father, a figure who had existed only in vague stories and carefully chosen photographs, was simultaneously overwhelming and underwhelming. Charlotte approached the situation with characteristic directness. She studied Nate openly, comparing him to the image she'd constructed in her mind. He was taller than she'd imagined, his voice deeper, his manner more nervous than the confident daddy she'd envisioned reading her bedtime stories. Do you have any pets? She asked him suddenly, interrupting the tense conversation between her parents. Nate blinked at the non sequitur. No, I don't. We have a cat named Pepper, she informed him. You should meet her too. The simple invitation, so innocent yet so meaningful, left Nate momentarily speechless. Oliver's approach was more cautious. He observed his father from a safe distance, cataloging details. The way Nate straightened his cuffs when uncomfortable, how his eyes crinkled slightly when looking at Charlotte, the precise way he arranged items on the conference table, seeking patterns, making assessments, forming impressions that would shape his understanding. When Nate noticed Oliver watching him, he smiled tentatively. Your mom tells me you're good with computers. Oliver nodded. I can program the classroom robot to move in squares or circles. That's impressive, Nate said genuinely. I was much older when I learned programming. Could you teach me more? Oliver asked, his voice barely audible. The request contained multitudes, not just for knowledge but for connection, for the father-son relationship he'd never experienced. Nate swallowed hard. I'd like that very much. Meanwhile, Charlotte had discovered Nate's phone on the table and was examining it with interest. This is fancier than Mom's. Does it have games? Charlotte, Claire cautioned, we don't touch other people's things without permission. It's okay, Nate assured her, watching his daughter handle his device. It's just a phone. But it wasn't just a phone to Charlotte. It was a piece of her father's life, a tangible connection to the man she'd just met. She looked up at him, her expression serious beyond her years. If I call you on this, will you answer? The question, simple yet profound, cut through all pretense. Would he be accessible to her, available, present? Yes, Nate promised, meeting her gaze. Anytime you call, I'll answer. Claire watched this exchange with complex emotions. The twins were connecting with Nate in their unique ways, Charlotte boldly establishing expectations, Oliver cautiously seeking common ground. They were, in their 5-year-old manner, determining what role this new person might play in their lives. And Nate was responding not as the ruthless CEO or the distant ex-husband, but as someone genuinely trying to meet these children where they were. It was a side of him Claire had almost forgotten existed, the Nate who could listen, who could set aside his agenda to focus entirely on another person. She wondered if the twins had accomplished in 30 minutes what she had failed to achieve in the final years of their marriage, capturing Nate's full, undivided attention. As we witness this powerful moment of truth between Nate and Claire, we confront one of life's most challenging questions: when is forgiveness possible, and when is it necessary? Claire kept her children from their father for 5 years, a choice made from hurt and protection. Nate prioritized his company over his marriage, missing the chance to know his children from birth. Both made decisions that altered lives forever. Where do we draw the line between protecting ourselves and punishing others? How do we balance justified anger with the possibility of healing? When does holding on to past wounds become more harmful than letting go? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who profoundly hurt you? Or have you been the one needing forgiveness for a choice you can't undo? Your stories matter, and they may help others facing similar crossroads in their own lives. This community grows stronger when we share our wisdom and experiences with each other. If today's story has touched you or made you reflect, please support our channel by subscribing and sharing with others who might benefit from these life lessons. On the Mr. Ross Story Trail, we believe that by examining these human moments together, we find guidance for our own journeys. Now, let's return to Nate and Claire as they navigate the aftermath of this revelation and discover whether a new beginning might emerge from the ashes of their past. The week following the gala revelation unfolded in a series of carefully orchestrated encounters. After lengthy discussions, Claire and Nate agreed to proceed cautiously, prioritizing the twins' emotional well-being above all else. Their first proper meeting occurred at a neutral location, a children's museum with interactive exhibits that provided natural distractions whenever the conversation stalled. Nate arrived early, nervous in a way business meetings never made him, his casual attire a conscious departure from his executive image. When Claire arrived with the twins, Charlotte bounded forward while Oliver hung back, assessing the situation from the safety of his mother's side. "We saw your building on the way here," Charlotte announced without preamble. "Mom said that's where you make computers smart." Nate smiled, grateful for her ease in bridging the awkwardness. "That's right. Would you like to visit it someday? Today?" Her directness left no room for corporate evasion tactics. "Not today," Claire interjected gently. "Remember what we discussed about taking things step by step?" The day progressed with moments of connection interspersed with uncomfortable silences. Nate discovered Oliver's fascination with the physics exhibit, where falling balls demonstrated principles of gravity and momentum. He found himself naturally slipping into explanation mode, describing concepts in terms a 5-year-old could grasp. "You're good at that," Claire observed as they watched Oliver experiment with different ramp configurations. "At what?" "Explaining complex things simply. You always were." The compliment caught him off guard, a reminder of capabilities beyond boardroom negotiations and product launches. Later, as they shared lunch in the museum cafe, they established preliminary boundaries. Nate would visit twice weekly, Wednesday evenings and Sunday afternoons, with all meetings initially occurring in public spaces or at Claire's home while she remained present. "I want a relationship with them," Nate stated as the twins explored a nearby display. "A real one, not just scheduled visitations." "That requires consistency," Claire replied. "Not just showing up when it's convenient. I understand that. Do you? Because these visits can't be canceled when investors call or markets shift. They need to be your priority, above RivTech, above everything." Nate met her gaze directly. "I've missed 5 years. I won't miss any more." As they prepared to leave, Oliver approached Nate with a small paper creation from the origami station. "It's a boat," he said quietly, offering the folded paper. "You can keep it on your desk." Nate accepted the gift with unexpected emotion, recognizing it as Oliver's tentative extension of trust. "Thank you. I'll put it right next to my computer where I can see it every day." The simplicity of the exchange belied its significance, a first step toward building a relationship that existed beyond biology, a connection that would require patience, presence, and profound change. The RivTech Executive Board convened for an emergency meeting 3 days after the gala. Media speculation about Nate's newly discovered children had sent stock prices fluctuating, while industry analysts questioned how the revelation might impact company leadership. Board members expected damage control. What they received instead was a comprehensive restructuring plan. "Effective immediately, I'm implementing significant changes to RivTech's executive structure," Nate announced, standing before the stunned board. "I'll be reducing my direct operational involvement to focus on strategic direction and product innovation." He outlined his vision, promoting Diane Chen to Chief Operating Officer with expanded authority, creating an office of the CEO where key decisions would be made collectively rather than funneling through him, eliminating his involvement in routine matters that could be handled by the leadership team. "To be clear," said Marcus Winters, the senior board member, "you're voluntarily relinquishing control of day-to-day operations?" I'm delegating responsibilities that don't require my personal attention, Nate corrected. I'll maintain final authority on major decisions while creating space for other priorities, these other priorities being your new family situation? Another board member inquired carefully. My children, Nate specified, refusing to minimize their importance with euphemisms. Yes. The questions that followed focused on practical concerns. How would this affect quarterly projections? Would major clients feel abandoned? Could the leadership team function effectively without his constant oversight? Nate addressed each query with uncharacteristic patience, demonstrating that he'd considered implications beyond his personal desires. The restructuring wasn't impulsive but methodical, designed to maintain Rivtech's growth trajectory while allowing him to become the father his children deserved. Later that week, he summoned Zara to his office. I need you to clear my schedule every Wednesday afternoon and all day Sunday. Permanently. She raised an eyebrow, having never received such an instruction in their years working together. Family time, he explained simply. Non-negotiable. Even during the Tokyo expansion? Even then. We'll schedule around those days. Zara nodded, making notes. And your 6 a.m. calls with the Asian markets? Move them to 8 a.m. I want to be available for morning routines. The practical changes extended beyond his professional life. Nate began researching family-friendly neighborhoods closer to Meadowbrook, recognizing that his penthouse, with its minimalist design and breakable art, was hardly suitable for children's visits. He consulted child development experts about age-appropriate activities and enrolled in a parenting class designed for adults entering children's lives after absence. Each decision represented a conscious redistribution of his most valuable resource, his attention. For a man who had built an empire by focusing singularly on business growth, this recalibration constituted nothing less than a revolution. Children's hearts operate on their own timetable, immune to corporate strategies or adult expectations. Charlotte and Oliver's acceptance of Nate into their lives unfolded gradually, marked by small moments rather than dramatic declarations. For Charlotte, connection came through shared activities. During their fourth meeting, Nate brought simple robotics kits designed for children. Her delight in building a small motorized creature and his genuine enjoyment of the process created their first experience of mutual joy. We make a good team, Nate observed as their creation moved across the living room floor. Charlotte nodded seriously. You're better at this than Mommy. She always puts the batteries in backward. A casual comparison, placing him in the familiar context of parental strengths and weaknesses, felt like acceptance of his emerging role in her life. Oliver's path proved less straightforward. His caution persisted through several visits, manifesting in polite responses and careful distance. Nate respected this boundary while continuing to appear consistently, demonstrating through actions rather than words that he could be trusted. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a Sunday visit to the city park. Oliver tripped while running to the code playground, scraping his knee badly enough to draw blood. Nate reached him first, kneeling beside the crying child with calm assurance. May I take a look? He asked, respecting Oliver's autonomy even in crisis. Oliver nodded through tears. Nate examined the injury with gentle hands, then cleaned it with the first aid kit Claire insisted on bringing to all outings. My dad fixed it, Oliver told Claire afterward, the simple statement containing multitudes. At bedtime several weeks later, Oliver asked if Nate could read his story instead of Claire. As Nate settled into the edge of the twin bed, Oliver leaned against his side to see the pictures, physical closeness that had previously been reserved for Claire and grandparents. Will you come back tomorrow? Oliver asked as Nate closed the book. Not tomorrow, Nate answered honestly, but Wednesday after school. You promise? I promise. Oliver studied him with solemn eyes. Okay, that single word, okay, represented hard-won trust from a child who had learned to be cautious with his heart. Nate recognized its value, understanding that Oliver's trust, once given, would demand perpetual reinforcement through unwavering consistency. For Claire, adjusting to Nate's presence in their carefully constructed lives required its own form of transformation. She had spent 5 years as the twins' sole decision-maker, building routines and traditions that reflected her values and parenting philosophy. Allowing Nate into this established ecosystem meant relinquishing complete control, a process that triggered both practical concerns and deeper anxieties. They need structure, she explained during one of their CO to parenting discussions. Consistent bedtimes, limited screen time, consequences that match the behavior. Nate listened without defensiveness, recognizing Claire's expertise in the children's needs. I want to learn your approach, not undermine it. His willingness to follow her lead, so different from the man who had insisted on controlling every aspect of their married life, gradually eased her concerns about conflicting parenting styles. The first major test came when Charlotte developed a high fever requiring midnight medication and monitoring. Claire texted Nate, not expecting a response until morning. He called immediately. "What can I do?" "Nothing right now. I just thought you should know. I can come over. Help take shifts watching her." The offer surprised her. "It's the middle of the night. She's my daughter, Claire." 20 minutes later, he arrived with child-friendly electrolyte drinks, a digital thermometer more accurate than Claire's, and a stuffed bear wearing a tiny doctor's coat. He took the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. monitoring shift without complaint, allowing Claire precious hours of sleep. In the morning, she found him in Charlotte's room, reading quietly while the child slept, fever finally broken. "You stayed," she observed. "Of course." The simplicity of his response spoke volumes. As weeks passed, Claire began consulting Nate on decisions beyond visitation schedules, Oliver's anxiety about an upcoming school presentation, Charlotte's interest in competitive swimming, educational approaches that might nurture their different learning styles. The most significant shift occurred when Claire planned the twins' birthday celebration. After describing her initial ideas, she asked, "What do you think?" The question, genuine rather than perfunctory, acknowledged his legitimate role in their children's lives. Nate recognized the offering for what it was, not just inclusion in a birthday party, but invitation into the meaningful decisions that shape their children's experiences. "Thank you," he said. Claire nodded, understanding that his gratitude extended beyond the immediate discussion to her larger willingness to make space for him in their family circle. True change reveals itself not in grand declarations but in sustained choices that accumulate over time. Nate's transformation emerged through countless small decisions that gradually reconstructed his identity and priorities. The man who once canceled anniversary dinners for business emergencies now declined board meeting extensions when they threatened to overlap with Wednesday visits. The executive who had measured success through market share and profit margins began evaluating his days by different metrics, Oliver's growing comfort in his presence, Charlotte's excited calls to share school achievements, Claire's increasing trust in his commitment. His home changed too. The sterile penthouse with its impersonal luxury gave way to a comfortable house in a family neighborhood 15 minutes from Claire's home. One bedroom became Charlotte's domain, decorated in her chosen theme of space exploration. Another transformed into Oliver's realm of books and building sets. The home office that had once dominated his living space diminished to a modest corner of the family room. RivTech remained important. Nate's innovative mind continued generating ideas that advanced the company's mission. But technology now served his life rather than consuming it. He established firm boundaries around digital intrusions, keeping devices away during family time and delegating after-hours emergencies to his expanded leadership team. The most profound evidence of change appeared in moments no business strategy could have manufactured, sitting patiently while Oliver methodically explained his latest creation, listening to Charlotte practice her reading without checking his watch, engaging with Claire about parenting approaches with genuine curiosity rather than automatic opposition. 6 months after the gala revelation, Nate joined a parent volunteer committee at the twins' school. Among the other parents, he was simply Oliver and Charlotte's dad, his corporate achievements irrelevant in discussions about fundraising for new code playground equipment or organizing the science fair. During one committee meeting, his phone rang with a distinctive tone that indicated a major client. Without hesitation, he silenced it and returned to the discussion about field trip transportation options. The action, unremarkable to everyone except Claire, who understood its significance, demonstrated that his priorities had genuinely shifted. Later that evening, as they discussed the twins' summer schedule, Claire acknowledged what she'd observed. "You've changed," she said simply. Nate considered this. Not changed exactly, more like, remembered who I was before RivTech became everything. "The person I married," Claire noted. "Parts of him anyway. The better parts." The comment hung between them. Not quite nostalgia, not quite reconciliation, but acknowledgement of the good that had existed alongside the difficulties. "The twins are lucky," Claire said finally, "to have that version of you as their father." Nate recognized the statement for the significant concession it represented. After months of proving himself through consistent presence and genuine involvement, Claire was affirming his place in their children's lives not as a biological fact, but as a positive influence. "I'm the lucky one," he replied, "to have another chance to get my priorities right." As they finalized summer plans, weeks balanced between both homes, activities that nurtured each twin's interests, family time protected from external demands. Nate understood that he had received something his wealth could never have purchased, the opportunity to build relationships that mattered more than any corporate achievement. The empire he'd constructed hadn't disappeared. It had simply found its proper place in a life now rich with connections more valuable than stock options or market dominance. Streamers in blue and purple, the twins' chosen colors, hung from every corner of the backyard. Tables arranged beneath oak trees held an assortment of snacks, drinks, and birthday presents. A hand-painted banner proclaimed "Happy 7th Birthday, Charlotte and Oliver" in bold, colorful letters. Claire adjusted the cake display, arranging Oliver's science-themed creation beside Charlotte's astronaut design, separate cakes for individual personalities that had grown more distinct with each passing year. "Need any help?" Nate asked, emerging from the house with a tray of drinks. "Everything's ready," Claire replied. "The guests should arrive soon." Watching Nate arrange cups with meticulous care, Claire marveled at how natural this scene would appear to outsiders, co-parents preparing their children's birthday celebration, a routine family moment. Yet for them, this ordinary tableau represented an extraordinary journey. 2 years had transformed them all. The twins had blossomed under the stability of consistent co-parenting. Charlotte 7 remained bold and adventurous, now channeling her confidence into competitive swimming and robotics club. Oliver had developed from a cautious observer into a thoughtful creator, building increasingly complex structures and designing games that reflected his analytical mind. The backyard gate swung open as Charlotte led a procession of arriving guests. She wore a laboratory coat over her party dress, her current ambition being astronaut scientist who would discover space experiments. Behind her, Oliver carefully carried a model rocket he'd constructed with Nate, eager to demonstrate its launch capabilities to his friends. "Dad," Charlotte called, "can we show everyone the experiment now or after cake?" "Let's give everyone time to arrive," Nate suggested, adjusting his casual attire, so different from the formal suits that had once been his uniform. Claire's parents arrived next, followed by Monica and her son, then Layla bearing elaborately wrapped gifts. School friends filtered in with their parents, filling the yard with excited chatter and laughter. The celebration unfolded with the comfortable rhythm of well-planned joy. Games organized by Claire, a science demonstration co-led by Nate and Oliver, Charlotte narrating the rocket launch with theatrical flair. Through it all, Claire and Nate moved in coordinated harmony, their co-parenting dynamic having evolved into something approaching choreography. When the moment came to sing happy birthday, the twins stood side by side behind their cakes, Nate and Claire flanking them. As cameras captured the moment, no one would guess the complicated history behind this simple family portrait, the separation, the revelation, the careful reconstruction of relationships. "Make a wish," Claire instructed as the song concluded. The twins exchanged glances before blowing out their candles in perfect synchronization. Whatever they wished remained their secret, but their smiles as they looked from one parent to the other suggested contentment with their present reality. After cake and presents, as the children played in the yard under Claire's parents' supervision, Nate found a moment to check his watch, not from impatience, but to confirm timing for the final surprise. "Everything on schedule?" Claire asked, joining him by the refreshment table. "The delivery should arrive in 15 minutes. Oliver's going to be thrilled." The surprise, a professional-grade telescope for the twins to share, represented Nate's evolved approach to parenting. Rather than separate gifts competing for favor, he'd chosen something that would bring the twins together through shared discovery, something that required parental involvement rather than passive entertainment. 2 years ago, Nate would have considered such a gift impractical. What value did stargazing offer when compared to coding skills or business fundamentals? Now he understood that wonder and curiosity laid foundations for all other learning, that time spent exploring the universe together created connections technology could never replicate. His transformation extended far beyond gift selection. Riftech continued thriving under the distributed leadership model he'd implemented, with Nate serving as innovation strategist rather than micromanaging CEO. The company had actually performed better with his reduced involvement, a humbling realization that his previous hands-on approach had sometimes stifled other talents within the organization. His calendar, once dominated by business commitments, now organized around family priorities. School events appeared in bold, custody transitions highlighted in blue, family outings marked with stars. Business travel never exceeded 3 days and never coincided with his parenting time. Most significant was his mental presence. When with the twins, he was fully with them, not distracted by emails, not mentally solving business problems, not rushing through activities to return to work. He had learned to inhabit the present moment, finding joy in ordinary interactions that his previous self would have dismissed as inconsequential. Oliver approached, tugging Nate's hand. "Dad, can you help me explain the constellation map to my friends? They don't understand about light years." "Absolutely," Nate replied without hesitation, following his son to the group of curious children. Claire watched them go, reflecting on the man Nate had become, attentive father, reliable co-parent, person who recognized that legacy existed in relationships rather than corporate achievements. The transformation hadn't occurred overnight, but through consistent choices that gradually reshaped his fundamental identity. The telescope arrived as scheduled, creating excited chaos as the children gathered to examine it. Nate patiently explained its features, promising each child a turn during the evening portion of the party when stars would become visible. "We'll start with Jupiter," he told them, his enthusiasm matching theirs. "If we're lucky, we might even see its moons." As Charlotte pushed forward with questions about other planets, Claire recognized the expression on Nate's face, wonder mixed with purpose, the look of someone who had discovered what truly mattered. As evening approached and the party transitioned to stargazing, Claire and Nate found themselves momentarily alone on the patio, watching their children arrange viewing turns at the telescope. "Thank you for coordinating with me on this party," Claire said. "The twins couldn't have had a better birthday." "We make a good team," Nate observed. "Better than we used to." The comment hung between them, acknowledgement of their evolved relationship. From adversaries following their divorce to cautious CO parents after the gala revelation, they had gradually built something neither had anticipated, a friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to their children's well-being. "I've been thinking about something," Nate said carefully, "about how people change when given the right motivation." Claire glanced at him, aware of the conversation's shifting tone. "The twins have certainly provided that. It's more than motivation, though. It's perspective." He turned to face her directly. 2 years ago, I didn't understand what mattered. I thought success meant stock valuations and market position. And now I measure success by Oliver asking for my help with his projects, by Charlotte calling me when something exciting happens at school, by knowing I haven't missed a single important moment in their lives these past 2 years. Claire nodded, recognizing the authenticity in his words. "You've become an excellent father, Nate, because you gave me a second chance," he acknowledged. "After I failed so completely the first time." Their conversation paused as Charlotte called for Claire to observe Jupiter through the telescope. When Claire returned, Nate had moved to the garden bench, his expression contemplative. "I've been wondering," he said as she joined him, "if second chances might apply to other aspects of life too." The question contained layers of meaning that couldn't be misinterpreted. Claire considered her response carefully, aware of its significance. "Second chances require both people to have changed," she said finally. "Not just one." "Have you? Changed, I mean." "Yes," Claire admitted. "I've learned that protecting oneself can sometimes mean closing off possibilities. That fear of being hurt again can prevent growth." Nate nodded, understanding her measured response. "I'm not suggesting we simply resume where we left off. That relationship ended for valid reasons. But you're suggesting something?" "I'm suggesting that we've both evolved, that perhaps the people we've become might have something to offer each other beyond Kyo parenting." Claire didn't immediately reject the notion, a response that would have been automatic a year earlier. Instead, she considered the man beside her, so different from the husband she'd left, yet with echoes of the person she'd first fallen in love with during their college days. "Small steps," she said finally. "If we explore this at all, it needs to be with complete awareness of what's at stake. The twins' stability comes first." "Always," Nate agreed. "They're the priority for both of us now." Their conversation was interrupted by Oliver announcing that Saturn's rings were now visible. As they rejoined the gathering, no declarations had been made, no promises exchanged, only the acknowledgement that doors once firmly closed might contain small openings for future possibilities. Later that night, after guests departed and the twins fell asleep exhausted from celebration, Claire and Nate sat on the porch steps, sharing quiet reflection on the day's success. "I never imagined we'd reach this point," Claire admitted. "After the divorce, after keeping the twins from you for those years, I couldn't envision us creating peaceful celebrations together." "I've been thinking about the lessons in all this," Nate replied, "about how we each had to lose something valuable before understanding its worth. For you, family," Claire observed. "And control," he added. "I had to learn that some things can't be managed through strategic planning or market analysis. Relationships require presence, not performance metrics." Claire nodded. "For me, it was about fear. I was so afraid of the twins experiencing the disappointment I felt in our marriage that I made decisions from that fear rather than from hope. We both made mistakes," Nate acknowledged, "significant ones. But we've learned from them," Claire said. "That's what matters now." They sat in comfortable silence, the evening air carrying distant sounds of neighborhood life, a contrast to the isolated luxury of Nate's former penthouse and the protective bubble Claire had created around her small family. "The most important lesson for me," Nate said finally, "was understanding the difference between success and fulfillment. I had achieved everything I thought would bring satisfaction, yet felt completely empty. And now I recognize that significance comes through connection, not acquisition. That being essential to these two small humans matters more than being important to an entire industry." Claire considered her own journey. "I've learned about forgiveness, not just offering it to others, but accepting it for myself. I made choices I believed were right at the time, but they carried consequences I hadn't fully considered. We can't change the past, Nate reflected. Those 5 years are gone. But we've created something new from what remained, Claire added. Something neither of us could have built alone. Their conversation embodied the story's central truth, that transformation rarely follows straight lines, that healing often emerges from painful breaks, that second chances sometimes arrive in unexpected forms. As they prepared to part ways for the evening, Nate gathering leftover decorations while Claire collected the twins' presents, they moved with the comfortable rhythm of people who had traversed difficult terrain together and emerged with hard-won wisdom. Thank you, Nate said simply as he prepared to leave. Claire understood the gratitude extended beyond the birthday celebration to the larger journey they'd navigated, from strangers who once shared everything to enemies who shared nothing to co-parents who had found a new path forward. See you Tuesday for the science fair, she replied. The ordinary exchange representing extraordinary progress. Friends, as we conclude the story of Nate, Claire, and their journey through separation and reconciliation, I hope you found wisdom that resonates with your own life experiences. Their story reminds us that our most painful moments often contain our greatest opportunities for growth, that sometimes we must lose our way completely before finding a better path. That genuine change doesn't happen through declarations but through consistent choices made day after day. What lessons did you take from their journey? Perhaps you connected with Claire's protective instincts or Nate's realization about true priorities. Maybe you recognized yourself in their struggle to balance personal fulfillment with family responsibilities. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What relationships in your life have taught you the most profound lessons? How have you navigated your own second chances? If this story touched you, please support our channel by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these meaningful narratives that illuminate the human experience in all its complexity. And remember, every life contains chapters still unwritten. Whether you're in a season of loss like Nate and Claire's early separation, or rebuilding like their cautious CO parenting journey, or discovering new possibilities like their epilogue suggests, your story continues beyond this moment. Until next time, this is Mr. Ross, reminding you that the most valuable legacy we create isn't measured in wealth or achievements, but in the lives we touch and the love we share.